good to go?
Okay, we're on YouTube. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everyone. And this evening is our regular City Council meeting for the month of July. It is 7:04, and I would ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And how about Council Member Steele? Would you mind leading us in the pledge? And I'll put myself on mute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Steele. My trusty little flag comes in handy. All right, Mara, how about I apologize, I'm just getting, I don't know why this goes off. Sorry, guys. Okay, Mara, let's do a roll call, please.
Councilmember Gully.
I'm here.
Councilmember Ash McPherson.
I'm here.
Councilmember Steele.
Present.
Councilmember Cummings.
Present. Looks like it's late.
Councilmember Zalewski.
Here.
Councilmember McDermott.
Here.
Council President Mantello.
I am here.
7 present, none absent.
Okay, we have the vacancy list, which was at the end of the agenda, if everyone saw that. The approval of minutes, I will take a motion for the approval of the June meeting minutes.
I motion that we accept the minutes as is.
Thank you. Councilmember Zalewski motions. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Ash McPherson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, before I present the agenda, I would like to request a resolution which was requested by one of our great partners, CDTA, the Capital District Transportation Authority. They are celebrating their 50 years of safe and efficient public transportation. And I would request, if everyone's okay, I'll make a motion to add it to the agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Zalewski, and we'll do slow roll, Mara, to add it.
Councilmember Gully.
Yes.
Councilmember Ash McPherson.
We
I'm
can
sorry.
hear you. Councilmember,
I
there
said
you
yes.
go.
Can
Okay,
you hear me?
yep.
Thank you. Councilmember Steele.
Aye.
Councilmember Cummings.
Aye.
Councilmember Zalewski.
Aye.
Councilmember McDermott.
Yes.
Council President Mantello.
Yes,
Resolution 70 is added by unanimous consent.
very good. We'll now go to the presentation of the agenda. We've added resolution 70, and I think council members are in agreement. We spoke before the council meeting. We have 60 public comments that came in to our city clerk. Many of them, all of them are on one subject, and we will be reading them in full. And all of us have agreed to move the public forum from the beginning of the meeting to the end of the meeting to do the legislation first, okay? And hopefully everyone's in agreement on that. So I will officially move the public forum to after the legislation. Okay, Mara, local laws. We have none. Thank you. Ordinance 41.
Ordinance adopting the City of Troy, New York credit card policy. Council President Mantello at the request of the administration.
Do I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Motion, Councilmember Zalewski. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second, almost a tie, Councilmember Ash McPherson. Discussion. Andy, did you want to add anything? We did talk about this in our finance meeting a couple weeks ago, but anything that you want to add?
No, not at this time, unless if anyone has questions regarding it.
Cool. Anyone have any questions?
Andy, excuse me, Council President,
Yep, Councilmember
Andy,
Ashton
can you
McPherson.
just do a 1 minute, 30-second, or just a 30-second overview of it real quick?
It's a credit card policy for departments other than the police department, which there was one already in existence. It's mirrored off of the police department one that was done off of recommendations from the state comptroller's office. Credit cards will be issued to 6 individuals to see how it works. And then if and when it works well, we can look at expanding it to other department heads.
Thank you. And the 6 individuals that they're going to be handed off to, there's going to be a chain of using how it's done and so forth?
Yes, it's all outlined in the policy.
Okay, thank you.
I'd also like to add that the city auditor took a look at this also and fully recommends it. And I think all of us are pleased that it's moving in this direction, Andy. So any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Ordinance 41 passes, 7 ayes, 0 noes.
Okay, ordinance 42.
Ordinance transferring funds within the 2020 general fund budget. Council President Mantello at the request of the administration.
Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Gully. Discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Ordinance 42 passes, 7 ayes, 0 noes.
Okay, resolution 60.
Resolution of the Troy City Council appointing Patricia Riley to the Troy Community Land Bank. Councilmember Zaluski.
Do I have a motion?
So move.
Motion, Councilmember Steele. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Second, Councilmember Cummings. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Resolution 60 passes, 7 ayes, 0 noes.
Resolution 63, I am going to make a motion to amend that resolution and add 2 folks, Phyllis Raymond and, I apologize, Mara, the first name I say,
Sarah Wollieber and Phyllis Raymond.
thank you, Sarah Nell Wallaber, yes. My handwriting is that bad. Do I have a motion to amend resolution 63?
Motion.
Motion, Councilmember Ash McPherson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Steele. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? On the amended resolution, do I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Motion, Councilmember Zaluski. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Ash McPherson. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Resolution 63 passes, 7 ayes, 0 noes.
All right, we are going to resolution 66.
Resolution of Troy City Council authorizing a public hearing for changing traffic direction on Jacob Street between River and King Street. Council President Mantello at the request of the administration.
Okay, I am also going to amend this resolution. You'll see in the second paragraph, the public hearing shall be held on July 9th. I would like to change that to July 23rd. Actually, our finance is at 6, so I'll say 5:30. So I am making a motion to amend. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Ash McPherson. Discussion on the amendment?
Can I interject? This is Mara.
Yes.
Can you also amend
Yes.
in the notice of the public hearing, the July 9th at 6 p.m. will also have to be changed? And then the second to last paragraph where it says any person who wishes to provide comments, they could provide those by Thursday, July 23rd as well. So anywhere that it says July 9th should change to July 23rd, and then 5:30 to, or 6 PM to 5:30.
The 5:30. Yeah, I apologize. I just caught the other two. So per Mara, we'd like to change July 9th. We have a motion. We have a second. Thank you, Mara. On the discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? On the amended resolution, do we have a motion?
Motion.
Motion, Councilmember Ash McPherson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember McDermott. Discussion? All in favor on the amended resolution?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Resolution 66 passes, 7 ayes, 0 noes.
And I would encourage folks to attend the public hearing. It's quite a proposal.
Sounded like Councilmember Cummings had something to say. That's why I
Oh,
had.
I apologize. Councilmember Cummings?
First here at home than I did walking around, so I'm gonna keep troubleshooting that, but I'll make comments later.
Okay. Or you could make them in the second resolution if you'd like. Okay, resolution 66. I apologize. Resolution 67.
Resolution of the Troy City Council authorizing a public hearing for changing traffic direction on State Street between 1st and 3rd Streets. Council President Mantello at the request of the administration.
I am once again going to make a motion to amend all three places where it states July 9th, 2020 at 6 PM to July 23rd, 2020 at 5:45 PM. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second, Councilmember Zaluski. Discussion on the amendment. Councilmember Cummings, you're all good?
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor on the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, on the amended resolution, do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion, Councilmember Ash McPherson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Gully. Discussion on the amended resolution. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Resolution 67 passes, 7 ayes, 0 noes.
Great, we are flying here. Resolution 68.
Resolution of Troy City Council authorizing a public hearing for changing traffic direction on South River Street between Main and Polk Streets. Council President Mantello at the request of the administration.
Once again, I will make a motion to amend, and obviously if these public hearings go over the time, it's fine. So I am going to change July 9th in all three places to July 23rd, 2020 at 5:55 PM in all three places. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second, Councilmember Zaluski. Discussion on the amendment. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? On the amended resolution, do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion, Councilmember Ash McPherson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Steele. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Resolution 68 passes, 7 ayes, 0 noes.
Great, we are rolling. We are on Resolution 70.
Resolution recognizing and celebrating the Capital District Transportation Authority, CDTA, for providing 50 years of safe and efficient public transportation in the Capital Region. Council President Mantello, Councilmember Ash McPherson.
Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Let's let someone else, since you're a co-sponsor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm just wrong.
Council President, I would so move, and I would request that I be added as a co-sponsor, please.
You got it. Councilmember Steele motions and would like to be a co-sponsor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Second, Councilmember McDermott, discussion. I just want to officially congratulate CDTA on 50 years of service. And obviously, many folks, many of our constituents take advantage of CDTA. Carm Vassell and his team are second to none over there. I call him the second Carm, though, because obviously I'm the first Carm. But anyway, the other Carm, he's just doing an amazing job at CDTA. They always seem to be on the cutting edge, and I just want to congratulate them and their team on 50 years of service. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Resolution 70 passes, 7 ayes, 0 noes.
Okay, we are done with the legislative items on the agenda, and we will now go into the public forum comment section. So if everyone's good with that, we'll let Mara kick it off. We have, just for folks out there, and we know that there's thousands of folks watching our YouTube live right now, and we have split up the 60 comments that came in 4. And Mara will be kicking it off with myself batting second. Councilmember Zaluski will be batting third, and we have cleanup, Councilmember Steele, also known as Aaron Judge. All right, take it away.
I just want to
yes.
preface things by saying that I hope I forwarded everybody's comments. As far as I know, I got 60 comments from people. I did respond to everyone I got and said thank you. So if you sent in a public comment and you did not get a thank you from me, it means that for some reason I did not get your email. So I just want to say that to begin with, all right? So our first statement is from Dan Pfeiffer. He lives on 9th Street in Troy. Tomorrow will mark 1 month since an estimated 11,000 people gathered peacefully in Troy to lift up and support our Black friends and neighbors. Today I ask each member of the Troy City Council, but especially my own representative, Anasha Cummings, what will you do to address police accountability? Anasha, in the weeks leading up to your last election victory, I canvassed with you around Hillside. We walked up and down 9th and 10th Streets talking to many of my Black neighbors about the coming election. You asked me that day what issues were most important to me. I told you that I had one important issue, police accountability. Anasha, I believe we agree on the importance of racial justice in this moment, yet I am uncertain whether you heard me then. I cannot tell if you heard the 11,000 of us demanding police accountability last month. I cannot say with conviction that you truly represent my Black neighbors in this council. What will you do to address police accountability is what I asked you that day canvassing, and it is still my question for you today. To those others on the council hearing my words spoken aloud on this call, each of you get to decide whether we really do have civilian control over Troy Police. You get to decide to what degree my Black friends and neighbors can count on the Constitution's 14th Amendment of equal protection under the law without regard to any differences of race, of color, or of nationality. Are you listening? I ask each of you, and especially Anasha, to hear the demands of the group Troy for Black Lives, formerly called Justice for Danique. We demand cops stop killing us and our children. We demand a newly formed civilian review board. The review board must have subpoena power and representation of no less than 60% of people most impacted by violence and police violence. It has been 1 month. You can begin the process of reforming the civilian review board today, if you choose to. Not using that power would represent a complicity in a racist system that denies equal protection under the law. Do not shirk your responsibility to the Black residents of Troy and to all of us who would also benefit from the same police accountability. If you did hear us 1 month ago, it's time to act like it. Second statement is from Ellie Irons. She lives on 9th Street in the Hillside neighborhood of Troy. My statement today addresses the lack of movement on the City Council with regards to meaningful reform of the Troy Police Department to address anti-Black police violence here in Troy. As a white woman raising a white child in Troy, I know that no one is free until we're all free. No one is safe until we are all safe. It's time to listen to the Black leadership of this city who have articulated a way forward, specifically with regard to creating a civilian police review board with the power to enact real oversight. On June 7th, I stood in solidarity with thousands of fellow residents as we lifted up and listened to the voices of our Black neighbors, friends, and community members at the Troy Rally for for Black Lives. I listened to Gertha Deepas, the mother of Edson Thevenin, relate a moving account of her son's murder by the Troy Police Department in 2016 and the ongoing turmoil, lack of transparency, and incomplete investigation in its wake. On June 10th, I heard the demands of Troy for Black Lives loud and clear at a press release at City Hall, including the call for a civilian review board with subpoena power that is at least 60% representative of communities most impacted by police violence. On June 30th, I listened to the voice of Zamir Thevenin, Edson Thevenin's 12-year-old son, describing life without his father in an interview on WOOC. In response to all these voices, I've heard nothing from you. Your silence in response is dismaying and disheartening. For the Black lives directly affected and all those entangled with them, I repeat, Troy for Black Lives' first demand: cops stop killing us and our children. The third comment is from Melissa Bromley, who lives on Springwood Manor in Troy. Dear Troy City Council members, I hope you are all doing as well as could be right now. I know you all care about our city and our neighbors. Me too. How can we work together to build a peaceful and thriving community? In Troy, police officers are the first line in responding to calls that would be better addressed by mental health professionals, social workers, and mediators. This puts community members going through their toughest days in contact with officers sent to subdue them instead of fix the root of their problem. It's a disservice to community members and to officers who don't have the necessary expertise to deal with these difficult situations. Evidence has shown that past negative encounters with officers can inform how some people in crisis respond to interactions with police. When things escalate, the use of force can be a likely outcome. Any individual struggling with behavioral health distress getting thrown in jail doesn't make us any safer in the long term. Can you propose an alternative? Cities like Eugene and Springfield, Oregon have been successfully operating a mobile crisis intervention program called CAHOOTS for decades. CAHOOTS, which stands for Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets, is a 24-hour service that dispatches a medic and crisis worker to respond to non-criminal crises. Cities like Denver and Olympia are piloting similar programs, and cities across the country are exploring a variety of models where mental health professionals can take the lead on responding to non-criminal crises. And she included a citation in her postscript. Can you explore a diversion away from criminal justice involvement towards community-based treatment alternatives, especially for youth and the mentally ill? And how can we reduce incarceration for nonviolent crimes such as drug use and sex work? These are questions that have already been posed to you by the group Troy for Black Lives, but I would also like to know the answers. Eileen McDermott, you are the chair of public safety and you are my city council person. Can you please follow up with me directly to respond to these questions? With gratitude, Melissa Bromley. The next statement is from Kali Colleen. I am a resident and homeowner in South Troy on 2nd Street. I run a business here and I own 2 separate parcels of land that I grow flowers on. I'm really invested in this town, which is where my grandparents grew up, where they raised my mom, where I'm raising my own baby, and where I have lived since 2011. During the summer of that year, I was headed home late one night after a concert when I happened to see a man standing on the guardrail of the Green Island Bridge. I was with friends, we dialed 911, and quickly turned around across the bridge again. Police responded very quickly, which was a relief, but I was shocked to see them charge toward the man, tackle him to the ground, and kneel on his back while handcuffing him. This wasn't how I imagined a desperate person would be treated by those who came to help. While I'm glad he wasn't able to hurt himself, I'm still upset by what I saw. This was obviously a minor moment in the history of law enforcement in this city, and a particularly nonviolent one, really. But it was my own very personal moment of reckoning with regard to the efficacy of policing and the vast and serious ways in which it is completely counterproductive and counterintuitive. We have a responsibility to think critically in this moment about how we utilize our resources as a municipality and a community. We know that there are grave problems with policing as a whole and specifically within Troy's own police force. It's time to rise to the challenge and take advantage of the work being done by other cities and members of our own community who are conceiving of new and better forms of response. I echo the demands of Justice for Demick, and I ask you to make progress on these demands now. We demand a civilian review board of police actions with subpoena power and representation of at least 60% of people most affected by police violence in our community. We demand a full and impartial investigation of every instance of use of deadly force by a police officer, whether or not it results in a death. This includes injury, and whether or not the victim is alleged to have been armed. when there is evidence of abuse, a vigorous grand jury presentation and prosecution. We demand that Troy Police be defunded and that money from the police department be redistributed. This redistribution is to be run by, determined by, and decided by communities most impacted by violent and murderous policing. This process must center our local Black-led groups, such as Troy for Black Lives, formerly known as Justice for Demique, who have, again, been making these demands for years. Thank you for reading this letter. I'd love to hear from you and hope you'll follow up. The next statement is from Sarah Cadeau. I am writing to express my concern that Mayor Patrick Madden has not yet issued a timeline to address Governor Cuomo's Executive Order 203 on police reform and state funding. It is extremely disheartening to learn that there has not been a public safety meeting to discuss police reform. This is an issue facing our community, and the City Council and the Mayor need to take these issues seriously. In Troy, there still has not been justice served for Edson Thevenin, who was murdered by the Troy police in April 2016. The suppression of official reports in this case is vital to understanding and serving justice. When will the Mayor address this executive order? The time for action is now. Thank you. And she lives on 15th Street, by the way. The next statement is from Daniel Lander and Hannah Vanderkolk, who live on Oak Street. Dear Mayor Madden and Troy City Council members, we are residents and taxpayers in Troy. We are writing to urge you to take immediate and sweeping action to meet with and listen to Black leadership in our city, end police racism and violence, stop the suppression of official reports in the case of Edson Thevenin, and protect the lives and well-being of Black community members. This is a profound moment in civil rights history. Which side will you be on? We are disheartened by the fact that no public safety meeting has been called to discuss police reform. The Police Objective Review Board, while nominated, remains toothless and with no subpoena power, and Mayor Madden has yet to issue a timeline addressing Governor Cuomo's executive order on police reform and state funding, Order Number 203. Utica, Rochester, and New York City have stated they will release police disciplinary records to the public, but there has yet to be word on any move towards police reform and accountability in our city. We currently live on Springwood Manor and are renovating our house on Oak Street and plan to live in Troy for a long time. We love our city and want to see it thrive, which we believe is inextricable from it being a place where Black individuals and families are safe, heard, and empowered. Please make the aforementioned issues the utmost priority until we see major changes, and seek counsel and leadership of those most effective. Troy for Black Lives has extensive demands we ask you to familiarize yourselves with and then contribute to enacting. Sincerely, Hannah Vanderkolk and Daniel Lander. The next statement is from Van Trang Nguyen, who lives on 4th Street. As a resident of Troy, I am disgusted at Mayor Madden's inaction in regards to addressing Governor Cuomo's Executive Order Number 203 on police reform and state funding. No public safety meeting has been called to discuss police reform. The Police Objective Review Board, while nominated, remains toothless and with no subpoena power. While neighboring cities and towns have stated that they will release police disciplinary records to the public, there has yet to be any move towards police reform and accountability in our city. I demand the City Council to take matters in regards to Black Lives seriously. You owe us your due diligence to stop suppressing information that brings real justice to families in Troy. The next statement is from Kathleen Zilch, who lives in 5th Avenue in Troy. I request that the Mayor and City Council address systemic racism and police violence, in particular these points. The release of all official reports regarding the murder of Edson Thevenin, the City of Troy's plan regarding Executive Order Number 203 on police reform and state funding, a concrete timeline for the implementation of police body cameras if one has not yet been announced, the lack of power and authority of the Police Objective Review Board, the public release of police disciplinary records, a new system in place for dealing with domestic violence calls regarding mental illness, sexual violence, etc., so that citizens in this city get connected with the resources they need and deserve. A new plan for allocation of funds to resources that help solve social issues in this city rather than punish communities through over-policing and incarceration. A policy ensuring all police officers are wearing masks when around the public and that those detained are being kept as safe as possible in times of a pandemic. A review of the police union and protections for officers who have committed egregious misconduct. Thank you. The next statement is from Aaron Sickler, who lives on 2nd Street. On June 12, 2020, Governor Andrew Cuomo issued Executive Order Number 203, which recognizes the systemic nature of police brutality and the over-policing of Black people across New York State. It underscores that all people in our communities have the right to be treated fairly and equally before the law. The order makes an explicit call to local governments to review policing procedures. It states, each local government entity must perform a comprehensive review of current police force deployments, strategies, policies, procedures, and practices, and develop a plan to improve such deployments, strategies, policies, procedures, and practices for the purpose of addressing the particular needs of the community served by such police agency and promote community engagement to foster trust, fairness, and legitimacy and address any racial bias and disproportionate policing of communities of color. Furthermore, the organization Justice for Demique, which organized the Troy Rally for Black Lives on June 7, 2020, has issued a set of demands for the city of Troy that include a civilian review board with subpoena power, including representation by no less than 60% of people most impacted by police violence, Black, Indigenous, people of color at the intersection of LGBTQIA, young people, people with disabilities, and the formerly incarcerated. The creation of diversion programs away from criminal justice actions towards community-based treatment models. Thus far, besides the nomination of the Police Objective Review Board, you have not taken substantial action to address either the governor's mandate or the demands of community stakeholders. As a concerned community member, I urge you to acknowledge the hurt and harm done in our community by systemic racism and take up these demands with greater seriousness and public input. The next statement is from Carolyn Nagy, who lives on 2nd Street in Troy. A month ago, Troy saw one of its biggest demonstrations in its history, with over 10,000 people marching its streets to state unequivocally that Black Lives Matter, to oppose police brutality, and to call for justice for Black lives lost or permanently harmed at the hands of Troy police, including Edson Thevenin and Demique McDonald. Despite the clear demand for urgent action, I am disappointed to see so little from Mayor Madden and the Troy City Council. Mayor Madden has yet to issue a timeline addressing Governor Cuomo's executive order on police reform and state funding. No public safety meeting has been called to discuss police reform. Despite the repeal of 50A and the commitments of New York City, Rochester, and Utica to publicly release police disciplinary records, Troy has not followed suit. No reforms have been proposed to address police brutality or over-policing, nor to reduce the Troy Police Department's massive budget. All the while, there is still no justice for Edson Thevenin and no justice for Demique McDonald, their families, and the communities who care about their lives. Together, this paints a picture of an administration and city council that seems wholly incapable of rising to the moment and addressing the demands of the movement for Black lives in Troy. I urge all of you to take action tonight to chart a new course for Troy, one that values Black lives, and as a city that we can be proud to call home. Thank you for your time and consideration. The next statement is from Christopher Scully. My name is Christopher Scully, and I live on 6th Avenue in the Lansingburg area of Troy. I hope you both, this is specifically addressed to me and to Jim Gully, by the way. I hope you both are as well as you can be. I am writing today to express my outrage with the mayor and city council's inaction in response to the brutality and violence perpetrated on members of our community by the officers of the Troy Police Department. As a city resident of over 16 years, I have borne witness to the violence the Troy PD has enacted on many of its citizens, and there has never been any meaningful change or accountability for the offenders. I would specifically like to know why there is still an ongoing cover-up in regards to the death of Edson Thevenin at the hands of Sergeant Randall French, and what the mayor and city council are going to do to end it and bring justice for the family of Edson. Disgraced ex-Rensselaer County District Attorney Joel Abilov rushed the case to a grand jury within days of Edson's killing, failed to call two witnesses, and allowed the shooter, Sergeant Randall French, to testify without signing a waiver of immunity, thus precluding the possibility of his being indicted. However, that is not the only scandal here. The internal investigation into the killing done by Joseph Santani of the Troy PD found that French's account didn't hold up to the evidence and testimony available, and it concluded that French had lied, acted recklessly, and needlessly and summarily executed Edson Thevenin. This knowledge was brought to Mayor Madden's attention by then Chief of Police Tedesco, and instead of firing French, Madden and Tedesco conspired to use taxpayer funds to purchase a second opinion in the form of a still secret memo by the ex-chief of police from Glenville, Michael D. Rinaldi. The original internal investigation was then leaked to the widow of Edson and subsequently published in the Times-Union. Citizens were outraged and protested. I was among them. The entirety of the city council was given the unique privilege to review Rinaldi's still secret memo, and they all paid lip service in the press to the idea that it somehow refuted Troy PD's own findings, allegedly on psychological and emotional grounds. This seems to make the council complicit in this ongoing cover-up. What will this council do to correct this egregious mistake, end the cover-up, and bring justice to the family of Edson? I support the demands of Troy for Black Lives, and I strongly suggest you do the same, including the call for a civilian review board with subpoena power that is at least 60% representative of communities most impacted by police violence. I hope you do the right thing. The next statement is from Ezra Tabul, who lives on 5th Avenue. I am emailing to echo the message put forth by Troy for Black Lives in the streets and online. I believe their request for the Troy Police Department to stop killing, for the city to form an effective civilian board, including those most effective, and for all of us to scrutinize more closely the use of deadly force, to stop working with ICE, and to develop non-police community assistance represents the minimum the city of Troy can do to prove it is willing to work to address the systemic biases of its police department. The governor has asked for plans. Troy could set the example by working with those who have taken the time to tell you what was most urgently needed. Excuse me. 11,000 people came to support change be enacted now. How will you hear their requests? For the moment, your record is not shining. How was Sergeant Randall French able to get away with what even his superior called an unjustifiable act of deadly physical force? Edson Thevenin was murdered and his murderer was not held accountable. Troy must do better. Troy for Black Lives has suggested how, and now it is your turn to give the community the tools it needs to be what it deserves to be. The next statement is from David Banks. My name is David Banks, and I have lived in Troy for 10 years, lately on Bell Avenue. My concerns are over the total silence from both the mayor and the city council with regard to the movement for Black Lives and police brutality that has swept the nation and Troy itself. Now that state lawmakers have repealed Section 50A of the Civil Service Law, it is now possible for our city government to release any and all police personnel records. Utica and Rochester have already announced steps to offer these records, with Rochester going so far as to create an online database that residents can query using a FOIL request. The availability of police personnel records to the public is particularly important here in Troy because, as was reported in the Times-Union, Mayor Madden's legal team cited 50A in keeping secret a September 2018 Internal Affairs report that clearly stated that Sergeant Randall French had forced Thevenin's car off the road, causing it to crash into a concrete barrier, and later lied about it. French also appeared to have lied about the circumstances surrounding his subsequent murder of Mr. Thevenin using his service weapon. The public, but especially Mr. Thevenin's family, deserve all records related to his murder, as does Demique McDonald, who thankfully survived a shot to the head from Officer Gerard Eiler in August 2017. We may also hear about the many other incidents that involve the Troy Police Department since I have lived here, including the June 2010 incident when officers Christopher Pole, Charles Castle, Joseph McNall, and George Anderson assaulted James Foley during a needlessly violent arrest of Shaquem Miller, who died under mysterious circumstances a few years later. We could hear about what led to the $60,000 settlement for James Hoole, who was beaten by Officer Kyle Jones, who, according to the Troy Record, allegedly did so because Jones disagreed with how Hoole administered a Facebook page. Do the canines have files too? If so, we might hear about the 2013 case of Theodore Ruff, who was bitten by a Troy canine that had previously bitten two other bystanders, but was nonetheless still allowed to be on patrol. We may also learn more about the Kokopelli saga and how, as Barry and Joseph Glick put it, the Troy Police Department harassed their businesses by parking cruisers outside the bar almost every night, scaring away potential clientele. I hope we also learn more about the 2014 FBI civil rights investigation that the Troy PD had to undergo. Perhaps we will find out how Dominic Comital was able to rack up hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of court settlements before he was finally allowed to resign. Maybe we'll also hear about the details of Sergeant Ron Epstein and Detective John A. Comital Jr., who were allowed to retire after they were involved in a 2017 illegal search and seizure that had them charged with bribery in addition to illegally entering a property. For many of these infractions, I suspect internal documents will reflect what we already know, that many of these officers have been allowed to, as State Supreme Court Justice Peter Lynch, who presided over Sergeant Epstein and Detective Comital's case, put it, leave with clean records if they avoid future legal problems. That is part of the problem here, that a bit of transparency can help solve. It's a small step in the right direction, which would also include giving the newly formed but still inactive CORB subpoena powers and the ability to fire officers they deem a danger to the public. Finally, let us also remember that PBA President Officer Nicholas Laviano stood in front of the City Council as you were considering a resolution affirming Troy sanctuary city status and blatantly stated that he would gladly violate this resolution every day I work. If this sort of brazen disregard for you, our elected officials, is allowed to continue, then I do not think it would make sense to call our city democracy. It is a police state in the most literal and direct way I can imagine. Either you start to assert yourselves as elected representatives of this city now, or we lose the very basic foundations of what it means to be an American. The next statement is from Denise Pickering.
Am I up?
Nope, I got two more.
Oh, geez, see, I'm so anxious.
Denise Pickering, I moved to Troy she lives on 2nd Street. I moved to Troy, New York in 2016 after living in Vermont for 10 years. Part of my reason for moving here was for work as I am an educator and was working full-time at the Sage colleges. But the other reason for coming here was that the city seemed to be diverse, growing, and welcoming to many people. As I have lived here, I continue to be inspired by these attributes, and I have also been concerned by trends that have plagued other communities that are diverse and growing, gentrification and related over-policing of communities of color. The recent deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, as well as so many other Black lives lost previously, has laid bare the fact that our criminal justice system is broken and that Black lives are being lost in part because of these problems. There are many reasons for this, and one thing is for certain. The solutions will need to be thoughtful and multifaceted. And it is possible. I saw neighborhoods walking together to attend the protests in Troy on June 7th. I am confident that this community and you as leaders can come up with creative solutions. To start, I am asking you to do the right thing for Troy and our country and immediately call a public safety meeting to discuss police reform. It is my understanding that a police objective review board has been nominated but has not been empowered, e.g. no subpoena power, etc., and that Mayor Madden has yet to issue a timeline addressing Governor Cuomo's executive order on police reform and state funding, Order Number 203. Other New York cities, i.e. Utica, Rochester, and New York City, have agreed to release police disciplinary records to the public, but to my knowledge, there has not been any word on any move towards police reform and accountability in Troy. This greatly concerns me and many of my friends and neighbors in Troy. This is a critical time in our country. Anti-racism policies must be created and implemented as soon as possible to address the racist policies, e.g. structural inequities, over-policing of communities of color, etc., that exist in Troy, New York, as they do in other towns and cities in New York and around the country. Please meet with and listen to Black leadership in our country, and Black leadership in our city, and end police racism and violence, and stop the suppression of official reports in the case of Edson Thevenin, and protect the lives and well-being of Black community members. Though I have owned several homes previously, I'm not homeowner here yet. However, I plan on living in Troy for the foreseeable future. I want it to be a place where all individuals are safe and cared for and have equitable opportunities and fair treatment. That is not currently the case for Black residents and communities of color in Troy. Mayor Madden, please make good on your letter when you said Troy should be proud to add its voice to that outcry that Black lives do matter. Excuse me. Make the issues I've mentioned a priority. Make thoughtful changes by seeking the counsel and leadership of those most affected. Troy for Black Lives has shared thoughtful demands, and I ask you to please familiarize yourselves with them seek appropriate and diverse counsel, and then take action to make them policy. Thank you for your service. You've been elected to serve our community. Please take this responsibility seriously. Next statement is from Cherokee Lynn, who lives on Fifth Avenue in Troy. For far too long, we have lived with discriminatory policing. It has been 1 month since 11,000 of us gathered in Troy, but it has been 400 years of fighting and resistance to the inequities experienced by me and my Black neighbors. In low-income communities of color, police and prisons have become the answer to nearly every social problem. The group Troy for Black Lives has planned direct actions to demand justice in policing. To my representative, Anasha Cummings, will you hear their demands and commit to the movement for police and criminal justice reform? Take action, reimagine what policing looks like in Troy, spend less on police, and invest more in efforts that will benefit the Black community. Take the steps to create community-based alternatives that focus on prevention, intervention, treatment, and education, especially for youth and the mentally ill. Encourage police to deprioritize enforcement of low-level offenses and invest in diversion programs which have been proven to promote safer and healthier communities. Do you hear us? What will you do? I will pass the baton to Council President Mantello for the next 15 letters.
We'll pass the bat. How about that? Okay, batting second. All right, here goes. Hi, Mara. If possible, I would like this comment to be read tomorrow night's City Council meeting. My name and address are at the bottom, so I'll state the name and address later. Let me know if there's anything else I need to include. Mayor Madden is yet to issue a timeline addressing Governor Cuomo's executive order number 203 on police reform and state funding. No public safety meeting has been called to discuss police reform. The Police Objective Review Board, while nominated, remains toothless and with no subpoena power. This is not a dig at those on the board, but on the powers that be. While Utica, Rochester, and New York City have stated they will release police disciplinary records to the public, there's yet to be word on any move towards police reform and accountability here in Troy. I demand that the City Council and Mayor of the city begin to take these issues seriously. We are at a tipping point right now in America, including right here in Troy. People are dying, and we urgently need to rethink how policing is going to be funded and conducted going forward. Nothing short of dramatic change is accessible. The status quo has resulted in nothing but violence, death, and erosion of the community's trust. As a Troy resident and a voter, the silence on this issue from Mayor Madden, Council President Mantello, and the council at large has been incredibly disappointing and disheartening, particularly in light of Troy PD's own recent history of firing upon unarmed African-American men, of whom was killed. That dead man's name was Edson Thevenin, and Mayor Madden's response to that killing was botched at best, and at worst looked an awful lot like a cover-up. Mayor Madden, there is more to being mayor than attending restaurant openings in the presence of a laudatory press. This is where the rubber meets the road. You can't avoid controversy forever. You can't ignore these issues of race and policing in Troy and hope they'll go away or that people would just forget. We, the people of Troy, will not allow that to happen, and in fact are not allowing that to happen. If you're not to the task, perhaps you ought to step aside for someone who is. As a Troy resident, a registered voter, and a registered Democrat who never misses a party primary, I can play a part in making that happen. I hope Mayor Madden, Council President Mantello, my own councilman, Anasha Cummings, and the rest of the City Council will approach these issues with the attention and concern they deserve going forward. Thank you for your time, Grant Haley, 200, oh, so sorry, I stated his number, but First Street in Troy. Okay, the next one. Mara, you have Andrew Lynn. I have Cherokee Lynn. Is that the same person? Okay, my name is Cherokee Lynn. I live on 5th Ave in downtown Troy. For far too long, we have lived with discriminatory policing. It's been 1 month since 11,000 of us gathered in Troy, but it has been 400 years of fighting and resistance to the inequities experienced by me and my Black neighbors. In low-income communities of color, police and prisons have become the answer to nearly every social problem. The group
I'm sorry, I already read that one.
Okay,
I was on mute, sorry.
Okay.
Do you have
Sure.
Andrew Lynn?
I do not.
I can read that one right now, if you'd like.
Very good, very good.
Okay. Andrew Lynn on 9th Street. I have lived in the Hillside neighborhood since 2007. I want to express my disappointment and anger at the lack of action on the part of the mayor and the city council to promote or propose steps to seriously address police accountability in our city. The cover-up of the murder of Edson Thevenin by Randall French is something that the mayor and the city council members are implicated in. The secret memo from Rinaldi needs to be made public so the public can reckon with their supposed leaders about the lengths to which they go to justify murder and protect the institution of the police. Anasha, I had hoped to get a clear message in support of the movement for Black Lives from you. Where do you stand on the demands put forth by Troy for Black Lives? There's a right and wrong side of history to be on here, and I hope you will use your position as a city council member to push the needle towards justice rather than a difference or worse. Also, the memo needs to be public. The secrecy surrounding the cover-up of Thevenin's murder implicates those who don't speak out. Do you support a newly formed civilian review board with subpoena power and the representation of no less than 60% of people most impacted by violence and police violence? Thank you for your attention, Andrew Lynn.
Thank you, Mara. This next person, Christophe Di Maria, I have no address, and maybe it's in here. Good evening, council members. Eileen McDermott, the whole council, and Mayor Madden, in no particular order. It's very, very small. I am Christophe Di Maria, longtime resident of Troy, New York, living at 2nd Street in my beloved South Troy. Wake up, all of you. Acknowledge the voices present here today and recognize that you're responsible to each and every one of us for what I will identify as an extensive history of misgivings and malappropriations. Your furthering complicity to structural violence, your maligned efforts of coercion, co-option, as well as coercion, and the deafening, it's very tiny, guys, and the deafening silence with which you attempt to hide your sworn duty to accountability is both intolerable and coming to an end. The onus is upon all of you to act with integrity and transparency. You must include us in the dialogue by not only providing empowered seats at the table of shaping our city's policies and the enactment thereof, but also by eating the words now baked and set into this humble pie served before you. Chew carefully, for they are sharp and full of pits. Black Lives Matter. Swallow. It is more than a slogan. It is more than good PR for city leaders. It's a cultural shift. It's the work. It's the understanding that we have benefited far too long from exploitation. We can no longer operate on avarice or sociopathic economic practices. We can change. We will change. And those that will not must learn to rotate their hearts in love. It is a tough love and will uneasily unseat those who resist its beating importunity. Chew again, swallow. It has come to my attention that the suffering residents of our city and those who support them have become a powerful force, calling to task the powers that be. In the last month, we have experienced the collective power of the people to organize around their shared beliefs and values, and to observe the ways in which you have erred in acting upon what they implore you by your persons and your offices to do. A peaceful rally of a reported 11,000 Capital Region community members took to the streets in order to demand these things. One, that all law enforcement, especially those in your employ on our dime, stop murdering Black, Brown, and Indigenous people as they continue to do, with impunity and malice. That the newly reformed Civilian Review Board is given subpoena power and is composed of at least 60% of those most directly affected by the violence you're party to. This includes the communities of BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, youth, people with disabilities, the incarcerated, and the former incarcerated. Cede the floor to them. Give them real power to change police practices. Next, that you explore and create programs that divert the funding and responsibility of the criminal justice system into community-led solutions that address treatment alternatives and mitigate unnecessary incarceration, violence, and loss of life. Stop criminalizing the poor, the young, the undocumented, the sex workers, and those suffering from mental illness, including substance abuse, that you disentangle yourself and all of Rensselaer County from ICE 287G, and that you designate Troy as a sanctuary city. This work to organize, support, and protect our right to demand these things was accomplished by Troy for Black Lives, formerly Justice for Demeke, and their affinity groups. It's your turn to fulfill these demands. We're watching, but we are no longer waiting. We will not be mollified. We are engaging. So listen to us, hear us, include us, and act. I must also ask why the mayor and you, the council, are also still withholding information from the public regarding the murder and subsequent cover-up of Edson Thevenin by the late Troy PD officer, Randall French. I demand that you share all records, artifacts, and information transparently, and that you ensure our community that an incident of this caliber of caustic cowardice will not happen again. What will you do to demonstrate your adherence to Governor Cuomo's Executive Order number 203, New York State Police Reform and Reinvention? How will the council respond to those you serve and those you serve under the wake of recognition that your system and practice of law enforcement is inherently racist and flawed? How will you use your elected temporary offices and the privilege of $15K a year that we pay you with our labor, our ideas, our time to right these wrongs and prevent future inequity? Will you work for all the people in the city of Troy, or just those that look, think, and act like you, with the same inequitable privileges, entitlements, and protections, the same insecurities, fragilities, and ineptitudes? Do better. Take a long, hard look inside yourselves. Realize that we are much more similar than we are divergent. Realize that your responsibility is to all of us and is grossly lacking, particularly to the communities that are suffering the most. Do you want to see the downturn of corruption, violence, crime? Start with yourselves and those you work with, then spiral outwards, empowering community projects that improve quality of life by providing assured access to healthy food, housing for all, and an equitable distribution of resources, and abolishing the institution of police as it currently exists. Move their bloated budget to create more educational opportunities for youth and adults. Move money from militarized weapons, improperly used body cameras, and underserved pensions to safe places for children to play, to make it easy for farmers who just need water to provide fresh vegetables to the neighborhood, to supporting arts programming that can inform, inspire, and even provide catharsis to the public at large. If you want us to invest in the government of the city of Troy, prove that you are investing in us. We can no longer abide meek or bloviated responses. We will not tolerate silence and inaction. We will not accept placation or meandering failures. Have another slice of humble pie. Keep chewing, keep swallowing. We'll be back again soon. Okay, next, Angela Beeler. My name is Angela Beeler. I live in the Hillside neighborhood of Troy, New York. It's been 1 month since 11,000 plus people gathered in Troy, New York to declare that Black Lives Matter and to demand substantive change in this city, region, and country. This is a matter of great urgency that requires more than speaking the correct words or sharing the right rhetoric. We, the Troy community, have many reasons to believe that the city will do all it can to avoid any real substantive change, most notably because that would mean really addressing the problems of police violence and abuse in this city. At this June 7th rally, Gertha Deppis, Edson Thevenin's mother, described the week following the murder of her son by Sergeant Randall French of the Troy PD in 2016. Gertha describes having been held emotionally hostage for 6 days, waiting for answers from the Troy PD. She describes how no one returned the family's calls or provided information. After waiting, the family then finds out that Sergeant French would receive immunity in the murder of Edson Thevenin. The actions of the city, the police, the mayor, in this case, clearly communicate the priorities of the administration. A day after the murder, Chief Tedesco rushed to a press conference declaring that French was not at fault, and DA Joel Abelow rushed to clear French of any wrongdoing in a grand jury hearing, all before really reviewing what occurred that morning. Years later, Mayor Madden's office suppressed an internal review that revealed French's lies carried out by Captain Joseph Santini, Now Mayor Madden's office refuses to let the public read the contents of a report by former Glenville Police Chief Michael Ranelli. The TU describes the concern of the city to find the mole who leaked the existence of the Centennial report to the family, again revealing the administration's priority. This family has waited and waited. 4 years later, Edson's family is still waiting. This evasion and silence communicates that Edson's life did not matter, that this family, his wife, children, mother, do not matter. It communicates to the Troy community that Black lives do not really matter to the city. The handling of this case shouts above the statements made by Mayor Madden's office in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. Yes, what the Thevenin case makes loud and clear is that, as Madden writes, collectively, we have not lived up to our very own ideals, and this city needs to strive harder. Edson's eldest son is now 12. He recently spoke out for the first time, sharing what his father meant to him, about the absence of his father, about the fear of the police that he lives with on a daily basis. I speak to my own young children about police violence. I tell them that as a white child, it is unlikely that he would ever face such violence at the hands of the police. I tell him it is our duty to do all that we can to fight the lives for our Black and brown friends and neighbors. I teach him that sometimes the work of challenging systematic racism means admitting we are wrong. I ask that the City Council, how will you work to truly ensure that this city and administration protects, values, and cherishes our Black community members? I say the city must reverse course, admit that it was wrong in its handling of the Edson Thevenin murder, reckon with the injustice that has been allowed to fester for the past 4 years and beyond. Edson's 2 children deserve nothing less. Angela Beeler, Jacob Street. Elizabeth Press. My name is Elizabeth Press. I live at Jacob Street, Hillside neighborhood. Last week would have been Edson Thevenin's 42nd birthday. While standing on 3rd Street, engaging with passerbys about this case, I noticed John Saka, the deputy director of PI for Mayor Madden, eating lunch one door down. I approached him and asked him his thoughts on the various demands of Troy for Black Lives and the Dear Mayor Madden letter. It seemed as if he hadn't heard of either, which led me to wonder what the mayor's office and city council are hearing. Did you hear the 11,000 plus crowd gathered to demand substantive change for Black lives? The mayor says that he wants to make meaningful change for my Black neighbors and friends. How can you accomplish this if you're not listening to those who are offering up thoughts and solutions? I've been listening. As a citizen journalist who has interviewed all of you in the run-up to the election, I seek to understand what is going on in our city and share it with the audience of the Hudson Mohawk magazine. We may very well have been the only outlet to give each 10 minutes to talk about what you would do for Troy. I've asked you about the Edson Thevenin case on and off the air. I've spoken to journalists and activists and Thevenin's family members about him. I've been listening and trying to understand. Most recently, I spoke to his oldest son, who is now 12, on the air. He is scared of the police, as so many young Black and brown folks are. This should not be the case. Now, as a community member, I ask you to do your part to hear this and make real change. I've also heard about how the city has done everything in its power to obstruct the public from getting access to various pieces of information throughout the Thevenin case. As Casey Seiler, the editor of the Albany TU, said, it is time to let the information out. For example, over the last year, the public has been waiting on the release of the city-funded Ranelli report. The public cannot see it until the federal case is settled. The catch is that the city is doing everything to delay this process. And what about the question of video from that night? In a May 2nd, 2016 TU article, it says that defense attorney Joe Hearn told the judge he had seen troubling cell phone video of the April 17th police shooting. He also said he tried to ask Police Sergeant Randy French whether he shot Edson Thevenin before or after he was allegedly struck by Thevenin's car. Where's that video? Why has it not been released to the public? It's time to stop the suppression of information in the case of Edson Thevenin. It's time to let the family have closure in this case. In general, I'm eager to hear what actions Troy is going to make. I've read Mayor Madden's statement in support of Black Lives issued before the march, yet Mayor Madden has not issued a timeline addressing Governor Cuomo's Executive Order number 203 on police reform and state funding. Why? And why is the city council not making steps toward meaningful reform of the Troy Police Department? Specifically, I want to encourage you to tonight to push for a civilian review board with subpoena power. This is at least 60% representative of communities most impacted by police violence. This we have heard as one of the demands that Troy for Black Lives put out during their press conference on June 10th, 2020. The newly reformed PORB that was announced on June 8th, 2020 as an action that has long been in the works does not cut it. It does not meet Troy for Black Lives' requests and demands for what it should be. I urge you to look at this as the first draft and to work on reform that truly has a chance at success. This is not a time to be silent or to drag your feet. Quick action is needed. Please do not let this city fall behind others that are taking meaningful action. As we just ran into you this past week, the Albany Common Council introduced several police reform proposals, including legislation that would tie funding for the city's police review board to a percentage of the police department's budget and give the board enhanced powers. The board would receive 1% of the police budget, or $540K, to fund outside investigations into allegations of excessive force or civil rights violations. Another reform would require the city police department to closely track demographic data on police stops and arrests. Anasha, you are my council rep, and I directly ask you as a resident of the diverse Hillside neighborhood, please stand up for my Black neighbors and friends and begin to take this issue these issues seriously. And please push the mayor to do something right in the Thevenin case. As a parent, teacher, and active community member, I beg you to listen to our Black neighbors and leaders and make decisions that really show that Black lives matter in Troy. Elizabeth Press. Rafael Varela. Dear Mayor Madden and City Council members, I'm writing to you to demand the release of all the disciplinary records of all Troy police officers, including the records of police officers who are not in the TPD anymore under New York State Law 50A. It has become apparently clear that this country, and particularly this city, is asking you as an elected official to do your part in this historical moment. Do your part, stop hiding. I'm also concerned about the cost of not releasing all of these records now. How many hours of Troy employees will be dedicated to the process and answer thousands of FOIA requests that will be coming if you don't release these records? Please become part of the solution. Stop being part of the problem. Black Lives Matter. Stop police violence in Troy, New York. Thank you. Rafael Varela. Jennifer Bartels. Mayor Madden stated in June 4th letter that Troy should be proud to add its voice to that outcry that Black lives do matter. What actions have been taken since this statement was made to show that you, the council, and the mayor are responding to this movement with real policy change? Have you met any of the demands from Troy for Black Lives, formerly Justice for Demi? I've yet to see or hear anything from the leaders of the city to assure me that you feel as passionate about Black lives as the 11,000 protesters, voters who showed up on June 7th. Troy is a long way to go before we can be proud of our city. This is time of unraveling, unlearning, and learning. What have you learned in the last month that surprised you, that you felt you should have been aware of all along, that you are now committed to changing? This is a huge movement and a historical moment. Do you want to play a role in healing and facilitating a great leap forward, or do you want to just watch it happen while you keep the status quo? Do the least amount possible to appease your constituents. 11,000 people. That's a lot of voters who are paying much closer attention now. 2nd Street, Jennifer Bartels. Okay, Amy Halloran. To the City Council and Mayor, I grew up here and need to see my city step up to the challenge of reinventing its policing situation. We are a city that is 69% white, and yet the policing and justice culture of our municipality skews against our Black and brown residents. Several horrible situations prove this, such as the 2016 murder of Edson Thevenin, the 2017 shooting of Demick McDonald, and the ugly cooperation of Rensselaer County with ICE. The racial reckoning that America is facing needs to come home, and our government must respond to our particular crises. Why are the Troy City Council and Mayor Madden still withholding information from the public regarding Mr. Thevenon's murder? How will the City Council and Mayor respond to the recent protests for Black Lives attended by over 11,000 people and Governor Cuomo's executive order on police reform? Most importantly, will the city invite the people most affected by police crimes to participate and guide citizen review of police failures? Troy is very proud of its history of abolition and the Underground Railroad, and we need to act now to find some pride in how we're helping each other today. This begins with acknowledging the destructive, racially influenced police scenarios happening in our midst. What will Troy do to reconfigure its current approach to protecting people against crime and dedicate funding and effort to supporting communities? Thanks very much for your work for our city. Sincerely, Amy Halloran, 10th Street, Troy. Okay. Now is Robert Broad, that's not one. Okay. Okay, Raquel Valho. My name is Raquel Valho. I'm a resident of 4th Street here in Troy. I'm writing today to, yet again, urge you to listen to your constituents who have made continued demands regarding police reform and accountability in our city. On Wednesday, June 10th, Troy for Black Lives held a press conference at City Hall, making a clear list of demands from our administration. Neither the mayor nor a single member of this council has followed up on these demands, nor have they made a statement responding to them. In fact, many of you opted instead to congratulate the Troy PD for the success of the Troy Rally for Black Lives. You failed to recognize the work that grassroots organizations and our communities did to ensure that day ran smoothly, including the coordination of volunteer medics, safety teams, water and food distributors, legal observers, childcare services, and the list goes on. Our communities kept us safe and care for us every step of the way. You should have recognized that too. So it does not go unnoticed that after that historical rally, which united over 11,000 protesters in our city, this city council and our mayor have yet to make substantive moves towards responding to demands laid at their doorstep. All over the country, municipalities are being pressured by their residents to seriously scrutinize police departments and the money allocated to policing our communities. Some cities have already stated they will become more transparent by releasing police disciplinary records, something you could be emulating at a much quicker pace. In our state, as you are all very well aware, Governor Cuomo has issued Executive Order number 203. And it requires that you develop a plan to reform and reinvent our police department in ways that account for racial discrimination and the historical anti-Black violence of police practices. Troy is fortunate to count among its residents the organizers of Troy for Black Lives who have been making similar demands of you to work towards racial justice in our city for years. You've been given through the executive order an ideal opportunity to take those demands and turn them into legislation. Council, as last time, I urge you to take this opportunity to move towards something bolder. Last time I wrote you, I gave you 3 of the demands formulated by Troy for Black Lives. I summarized them again for you tonight. The PORB is currently toothless. We demand a review board with subpoena power and at least 60% representation on the board of those most impacted by policing and police violence in our communities. We demand full investigation into every instance of deadly force by a police officer, whether or not it results in death. And last, we demand divestment into policing and incarceration and a redirection of those funds towards community-run and led programs, including education and restorative justice services. What will this council do to substantively respond to what 11,000 people gathered to demand? We want accountability, transparency, justice, Black Lives Matter. Thank you. And that was Raquel Velho. Next, we have Laura Rabineau. Hi, Mara. Note there was a slight typo, an extra from, okay. My name is Laura Rabineau. I live on Madison Street in District 5 in South Troy. Last month, around 11,000 people came out in Troy to affirm that Black Lives Matter. This was a tremendous show of support and love in our city. one which highlighted our too often under-recognized history of police brutality and injustice. It is important that we affirm that Black Lives Matter as a city, but we cannot both affirm that Black Lives Matter and recognize the inequity, pain, and violence in our broader society with respect to racism, and not at the same time recognize our own part in that inequity, pain, and violence, including and perhaps especially the violence against Black residents due to police brutality. It would be a kind, grand, cognitive dissonance that is unfortunately too common. We need instead to close the chasm between laudatory rhetoric and action, between performative allyship and meaningful change. This includes taking actions that, thanks especially to Black organizers in our city, have already clearly been outlined for the city's administration and Troy City Council. One, issue a clear timeline with benchmarks and meaningful leadership by impacted community members addressing Governor Cuomo's executive order on police reform and state funding, and do it ahead of the upcoming city budget process. Two, hold a public safety committee meeting to discuss police reform. Three, commit to the public release of police disciplinary records as other New York cities, including Rochester, Utica, and New York City have done, following from the repeal of 50A by our state legislature and governor. Four, introduce legislation or administrative policies to address police brutality, over-policing, and redirect meaningful portions the Troy PD's budget, which has increased even as other city services and budget lines have struggled to provide residents with better quality of life. And then the last one, ensure justice for Edson Thevenin, for Demick McDonald, for their families, and for the communities impacted by their lives. As someone who has taught college students, I am reminded that true learning and true growth can only be achieved through praxis, the process by which a theory, lesson, or skill is enacted, embodied, or realized. The same can be said of justice. We have not realized or approached the realization and praxis of justice as a city, but we certainly need to. Our city council and administration have a vital role to play in that realization. You have not played that role to date, but I hope you will. Thank you for your time and consideration, Laura Ravenel. Okay, next we are going to Dear Mara. Okay, Ashley. My name is Ashley Farrow Murray, and I am a resident of Troy's East Side neighborhood residing at Maple Avenue. Mayor Madden wrote in his June 4th, 2020 letter to the community, Troy should be proud to add its voice to that outcry that Black lives do matter. I asked Mayor Madden to recognize and learn from the parts of Troy that have been doing this work and doing it well for a long time. I look to the incredible work of Justice for Demick and Troy for Black Lives, organizations including Soul Fire Farm that serve our community so well, Black artists working in Troy with limited local support structures, and the 11,000 people that gathered in our city to rally despite fear-mongering perpetuated by the city. These are the people in communities that I'm proud to call my neighbors and that I will work to support. It's high time for Mayor Madden and Troy City Council to wield their power to support these neighbors and this movement. This is how the mayor and the city council should add their voices to the outcry, and I have not seen it happen yet. The mayor announced the nomination of the poor, but that body needs immediate subpoena power and to be given the resources to have actual impact. I urge the mayor to release a timeline addressing Governor Cuomo's executive order number 203 on police reform and state funding, and to do so swiftly with a focus on prioritizing the safety of Troy's Black community above all else. I expect that as a part of reform efforts, the mayor will finally release police disciplinary records to the public. I also ask that the mayor and the city council specifically and publicly address the clear and actionable demands put forth by Justice for Demick. Mayor Madden, the blatant racism that I see in our neighborhood alone is systematic and unconscionable. I do not understand how you can stand idly by and not use your voice and the incredible power that you have in our community to unequivocally support the Black Lives Matter movement with quantifiable steps toward anti-racism in Troy. I expect that you will do so, that you and the city council will publicly explain how you will do so, and that you will start with radical police reform. Ashley Farrell Murray. Okay. Okay, dear City Council, my name is John Johansson. I live on Mill Street in South Troy. As a Troy citizen and property owner, I urge the city to take deep and immediate action to address issues of systemic racism and policing in our city. I understand that there are hurdles. We didn't create these issues, and there is inertia in our systems that makes change difficult. Yet we all need to do our part, and you need to do yours to the fullest extent as our elected officials. It is a moral imperative. Change is critical, not just for the Black lives in question, but for our city as a whole. We can have a thriving city and downtown if that means leaving others behind and continuing to pay the price for economic, social, and legal systems which hold them down. Recently, over 10,000 protesters took to the streets throughout the country. Changes, while still deeply inadequate, are starting to be made. Nearby upstate cities like Utica and Rochester are releasing police disciplinary records to the public and working toward other changes. Yet I've heard of nothing concrete from Troy. To my understanding, the city has not taken action regarding Executive Order number 203 on police reform and state funding. The city has not set up public meetings to discuss needed police reform, and while there is a PORB, it remains powerless. This isn't good enough. We are not yet seeing the leadership we need and expect. We need to do better. It's a moral imperative. Thank you for your time, John Johansson. Michelle Temple. My name is Michelle Temple. I live on 3rd Street in Troy, New York. I've worked with the deaf and hard of hearing community for over 15 years and continue to be an advocate for the unheard and unseen. The sound of my voice you are hearing now is both a physiological and psychological phenomenon. The air I inhale is processed through the involuntary mechanics of my lungs, my throat, the shape of my mouth, to the mechanics of your ear. You hear these words. The act of listening is subjective, a function of your brain's capacity to interpret, give thought to, and consider the sound it receives. Tone, while used to describe the color of one's skin, can also be used to describe the emotion detected in one's voice. The ability to empathize lies in the ability to listen. Please take this moment to listen to the tone of Edson Thevenon's mother, transcribed from an audio expert played in an interview conducted by Elizabeth Press with Thevenon's son, Zamir. Zamir was standing next to his grandmother as she spoke these words at the Troy Black Lives Matter rally in Troy on June 7th. After he was murdered, he was forced to wait for the authorities to release his body for burial. For 6 days, we were held emotional hostage as we waited for answers from the Troy Police Department. No one returned to our calls, nor provided information. Instead, after 6 days, we were told that the officer involved received immunity for his unlawful, blatant act of murder on my son, Edson Thevenon. We waited then, and we continue to wait. And for the last 4 years, we are still waiting. It's hard, chokes up, silence. Audience begins to applaud and offer words of support, waiting for answers, waiting for the truth, waiting for a system to change, waiting for someone to hear our voice, waiting for those who swore to protect and serve to understand. I want them, you, to understand that Black lives matter. On that night when Edson was pulled over, the content of his character was not seen. The only thing that was seen was the color of his skin. The demands from Black lives cannot be snuffed out by racist police who murder humans based on the tone of their skin. The pain of Thevenon's mother was felt in the tone of her voice by 11,000 people that day. The ghost of Thevenon's voice, whose name has been omitted and blacked out from the records of Black lives silenced by racist police acts of lynching, will continue to reverberate through his mother's pleas. Much like our president hiding in the basement of the White House from Black Lives Matter's protests, our mayor's silence and tone-deaf addresses to the citizens of Troy perpetuates violence while megaphones outside his office amplify Black voices from the street below demanding. Cops stop killing us and our children. A newly formed civilian board, the review board must have subpoena power and representation of no less than 60% of people most impacted by violence and police violence. Okay, next, Emily Brown. Okay, Emily Brown and Ryan Rose, 2nd Street, Troy. To Mayor Madden, members of the council, as constituents of your city, we are writing to state first and foremost that Black Lives Matter. We support the Troy movement for Black lives. We support demilitarizing our police, and we support the call for Troy to become a sanctuary city. We appreciate your official statement in support of Black lives and the work that you have started in order to carry out Governor Cuomo's executive order to examine how our militarized police departments are influenced by and carry out racial injustice based on this country's racist history. We have seen the effects in our own city of Troy with the needless deaths of Edward Thevenin and Demeke McDonald, and we are still waiting for justice for their families and loved ones. We appreciate that you have nominated members of a civilian review board in accordance with the governor's executive order. However, without subpoena power and a timeline outlining actionable items, calling for reform and accountability, we will not see real progress or change. This is an urgent matter and lives depend on your actions. Too many lives have already been lost. Too many families are grieving. We cannot wait and allow another family in our community to lose a loved one, to see any future snuffed out because our city cannot confront our racist past. Mayor Madden, as an elected official, you have real power to create change and influence. You have spoken up in support for the Black Lives Matter movement. Now we urge you to use your influence to create policy for changes to policing and to hold our police departments accountable. Other cities in New York have already agreed to release police disciplinary records to the public. Troy needs to do the same, and we need to listen to and heed the demands of Black organizers and activists. 11,000 people showed up in support of Black Lives on June 7th. Your city has spoken. If you wish to remain our representative, we need evidence that your support of Black lives and commitment to undoing racism is based in policy change and not just a publicity stunt. Emily Brown, Ryan Rose. And I believe my last one is, let's see if this is, no, I'm looking for Peck, Mara. Raymond, Emily Brown, I have is, oh, okay. I'm a resident of Troy, currently living at 146 2nd Street. This is Marissa Peck. I'm working in North Central Troy. What is your investment in this community? I'm writing to encourage you to immediately freeze additional funding for the Troy PD and reallocate $10 million from the Troy PD budget to community services and projects led by and centering Black communities most impacted by violent policing. The excessive TPD budget should be redistributed to safer streets for pedestrians and bikers, health services downtown, including COVID testing, for residents who do not have a car, community-based mediation and counseling services, affordable housing for all, healthy food access for all, after school and summer programming for all youth in the city, and the continued development and maintenance of parks and green spaces for residents to exercise and connect with the earth. This is important because these programs and projects build healthy communities and invest in future generations who deserve to grow up in a safe space with leaders who invest in them and not in institutions that continue to abuse their power, break the law, and hurt people. I'm writing in solidarity and support with the demands of Troy for Black Lives. The City Council has done nothing to address these demands, nor the historic rally last month of 11,000 people. The City Council continues to be complicit in the murder and harm of Black people in Troy. We remember the lynching of Edson Thevenin and the attempted murder of Demeke McDonald by Troy police, as well as the subsequent cover-ups by Mayor Madden, district attorneys, and other Troy officials. Defund Troy police now, invest in Black communities. Marissa Peck. I will now hand my bat over to Councilmember Zaluski.
Okay, I'm bringing my list up now. First time. Oh, actually, one of my constituents sent an email directly to the city council. He did not send it to Mara, but it was sent yesterday, so it was definitely on time. And he indicated that he wanted these comments read. So I'm going to read these comments. This is from Dylan Reese. He sent it just to the city council. He said, council members, the following are my comments to be read Thursday during the city council meeting. I demand the following, that city council issue a public response to the demands of Troy for Black Lives, previously known as Justice for Demik. That city council call a public safety meeting, and that Mayor Madden publicly issue a timeline for responding to Governor Cuomo's executive order number 203. Thank you, Dylan Reese. He did not include his address, but I know that he lives on Linden Ave. So I just wanted to make sure that that was read into the record. Now I'm going to start with my set of 15. First one is from Nathan Meltz on Sauce Avenue. My name is Nathan Meltz, and I live on Sauce Avenue in Troy. A month ago, Troy saw one of its biggest demonstrations in its history, with over 10,000 people marching in its streets to state unequivocally that Black Lives Matter, to oppose police brutality, and to call for justice for the Black lives lost or permanently harmed at the hands of Troy police, including Edson Thevenin and Demik McDonald. Despite the clear demand for urgent action, I am disappointed to see so little from Mayor Madden and the Troy City Council. Mayor Madden has yet to issue a timeline addressing Governor Cuomo's executive order on police reform and state funding. No public safety meeting has been called to discuss police reform. Despite the repeal of 50A and the commitments of New York City, Rochester, and Utica to publicly release police disciplinary records, Troy has not followed suit. No reforms have been proposed to address police brutality or over-policing, nor to reduce the Troy PD's massive budget. All the while, there is still no justice for Edson Thevenin and no justice for Demik McDonald, their families, and the communities who care about their lives. Together, this paints a picture of an administration and city council that seems wholly incapable of rising to the moment and addressing the demands of the movement for Black lives in Troy. I urge all of you to take action tonight to chart a new course for Troy, one that values Black lives and as a city that we can be proud to call home. Thank you for your time and consideration. Again, that was Nathan Meltz, Sauce Avenue. The next one is from Zachary Hayes on 4th Street. Dear City Council members, I am a resident of Troy on 4th Street. I went to school at RPI and chose to stay here and live and work in this community because I fell in love with it. I am writing to encourage you to immediately freeze additional funding for the Troy Police Department and reallocate $10 million from the TPD budget to community services and projects led by and centering on Black communities most impacted by violent policing. The excessive TPD budget should be redistributed to programs such as education, public transit, and assistance for Troy's homeless population. This is important because it will shift the focus away from punishing members of our community to providing them with the support they need to live their lives and support those around them. I am writing in solidarity and support with the demands of Troy for Black Lives. The City Council has done nothing to address these demands, nor the historic rally last month of 11,000 people. The City Council continues to be complicit in the murder and harm of Black people in Troy. We remember the lynching of Edson Thevenin and the attempted murder of Demik McDonald by Troy police, as well as the subsequent cover-ups by Mayor Madden, district attorneys, and other Troy officials. Defund Troy police now, invest in Black communities. Sincerely, Zachary Hayes. The next public comment comes from Karen Dyer on J Street. Dear City Council members, my name is Karen Dyer and I live on J Street in Troy. What is your investment in this community? I am writing to encourage you to immediately freeze additional funding for the Troy Police Department and reallocate $10 million from the TPD budget to community services and projects led by and centering on Black communities most impacted by violent policing. The excessive TPD budget should be redistributed to organizations such as the Boys and Girls Club, the YWCA, the Sanctuary for Independent Media, Power Breakfast Club, and the Troy City School District. This is important because Black people are dying, getting attacked by the police, and being oppressed and disrespected by local figures and businesses. I am writing in solidarity and support with the demands of Troy for Black Lives. The City Council has done nothing to address these demands, nor the historic rally last month of 11,000 people. The City Council continues to be complicit in the murder and harm of Black people in Troy. We remember the lynching of Edson Thevenin and the attempted murder of Demeke McDonald by Troy police, as well as the subsequent cover-ups by Mayor Madden, district attorneys, and other Troy officials. Defund Troy police now. Invest in Black communities. Sincerely, Karen Dyer. The next email came from Allison King. Mara, you indicated she's in Waterford, New York. Should I read that now or save that?
Ken, let's save that one, since we have so many other residents who have written in. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to skip over Allison King for now. The next one is from Catherine McTighe. Hello, my name is Catherine McTighe. I lived and worked in Troy for 4 years while I was a student at Russell Sage College. I still frequent the city for work and to socialize with friends who live there before the pandemic. I'm writing to implore the council to listen and heed the demands of Troy's Black and POC constituents who have been crying out for substantial changes to be made to address systemic racism and police brutality. Edson Thevenin and Demeke McDonald are only 2 cases where harm has been perpetuated by our city's police force and where the community continues to seek overdue justice. I refer you to the 13 demands that have been listed by the All of Us community organization for actions to take next. The 13 demands reflect the dire needs of your community from the voices of the community whom you serve. They know what they need from you, and they have made their demands clear. To continue to ignore them is white supremacy in action. It will not go unnoticed when members of this council who remain silent and inactive in the face of tremendous pain and suffering are slated for re-election. We are all watching. Regards, Catherine McTighe. And I actually don't have an address for Catherine. The next letter is from Elon Michaud on River Street. Dear City Council members, my name is Elon. I am a resident of Troy. I live on River Street and I'm a student at Hudson Valley Community College. I am writing in solidarity and support with the demands of Troy for Black Lives. The City Council has done nothing to address these demands, nor the historic rally last month of 11,000 people. The City Council continues to be complicit in the murder and harm of Black people in Troy. I am writing to encourage you to immediately freeze additional funding for the Troy Police Department and reallocate $10 million from the TPD budget to community services and projects led by and centering on Black communities most impacted by violent policing. We remember the lynching of Edson Thevenin and the attempted murder of Demeke McDonald by Troy police, as well as the subsequent cover-ups by Mayor Madden, district attorneys, and other Troy officials. Defund Troy police now, invest in Black communities. Sincerely, Elon Michaud. The next email comes from one of my constituents, Stephanie Stoyle on 5th Avenue. Dear City Council members, I am Stephanie Stoyle, homeowner and resident at 5th Avenue in Troy. I am writing to encourage you to defund the Troy Police Department and reallocate funds to community services and projects led by and centering on Black communities most impacted by violent policing. This is important because the police are asked to do too much, from maintaining order and keeping the peace to dealing with mental health crises and medical issues. It is not possible for them to be qualified and capable of addressing all of these tasks at once, and therefore funds should be directed to other services. I support the demands put forth by Troy for Black Lives, which were outlined at the historic rally last month of 11,000 people. These include giving the newly formed PORB subpoena power and the creation of diversion programs away from criminal justice involvement to community-based treatment options for the youth and mentally ill. The City Council has done nothing to address these demands. I sadly remember the lynching of Edson Thevenin and the subsequent cover-ups. While many of those involved in that terrible miscarriage of justice are no longer involved in the city of Troy, from the officer involved, the former police chief and former district attorney, the conditions which allowed it to occur still exist. The City Council continues to be complicit in the murder and harm of Black people in Troy. I ask that you release all reports and documents to the public regarding this incident to show transparency and to help our city move forward from here. Thank you, sincerely, Stephanie Stoyle. The next email is from Jacob Shipley on 2nd Street. Dear City Council members, my name is Jacob Shipley and I am a resident of Troy on 2nd Street. When we read in the history books about Nazi-occupied Germany, slavery in the South, and the Jim Crow era, what do you think? Are you horrified by the actions of the powerful and wish desperately that the brutality and deaths had never happened? Me too. These are awful moments in history, and I am positive that part of your reasoning for engaging in politics was to make sure these things don't happen again, to benefit the community so that everyone is safe and taken care of. Well, we are living in another moment for the history books. With the global pandemic and a resurgence of civil rights era activism, now is the time to take your place. Now is the time to decide where you would have stood when the Nazis knocked on your door asking for information on your neighbor. Now is the time to decide whether you would have engaged in enslaving other humans for profit because of the color of their skin. Now is the time to decide whether you would have stood with MLK as he walked across the bridge at Selma, knowing full well that there were fire hoses, dogs, and guns waiting for him at every protest. This isn't rhetorical. Nazis and white supremacists are gaining power, parentheses, the head of our local PBA chapter was caught sharing racist comments on social media quite recently, parentheses. The prison industrial system of mass incarceration is dramatically similar to Jim Crow laws and slavery laws before it, and we have hours of video content from the last 2 months documenting police brutality against peaceful protesters. When we look back at this moment in 50 years, where will we see yourself standing? Because history judges us all in these moments, I implore you to take a stand in support of our community that needs money and social programs to help reduce crime, not more policing. Support our minority and lower income communities in your budget rather than a police force that has demonstrated they are willing to lie to the public for their own self-image. Please do not bow to pressure from an aggressive, destructive, and overly powerful police union. Listen to your community, please. We need your help because we cannot do it alone. Thank you, Jacob Shipley. And his pronouns are he/him. Next email is from Rory Jennings on 4th Street. Dear council members, my name is Rory Jennings and I am a resident of 4th Street in Troy, New York. 1 month ago, our city hosted a rally with over 11,000 attendees, all of whom raised their voice in opposition to our country's long history of police brutality and systemic racism. Their message was clear: Black Lives Matter and justice for Black lives taken or permanently harmed at the hands of the Troy police should be a top priority of our city's government. The rally was followed up by a press conference organized and conducted by Troy for Black Lives, parentheses, formerly Justice for Demeke, parentheses. Our elected officials needed only to look out the window of their office on that day and listen to their city's residents to know that they demand action to correct the wrongs of the past and chart a path forward that is equitable and just for all. The silence and inaction of the City Council and Mayor Madden in response to what is clearly the will of this city's residents is unacceptable. I am writing to you today to strongly urge you as council members to do the following. Form a civilian review board of the Troy Police with subpoena power that is made up of no less than 60% of residents most impacted by violence and police violence, namely Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Release the disciplinary records of Troy police officers like other cities in New York have in light of the repeal of Section 50A, and make a commitment to holding police accountable for their actions. Call a meeting of the Public Safety Committee to discuss police reform. Develop a plan in accordance with Executive Order number 203 from Governor Cuomo to reinvent and reform the police, which includes reallocating funds from the Troy Police Department budget to community-based programs and services for residents most affected by police violence, and open that plan up to public comment. Thank you for your time and consideration. It is my hope that this letter, along with the many other letters you are receiving from your constituents, makes it clear that police reform and investing in education, infrastructure, and social programs for those most affected by police violence and systemic racism should be a top priority for the City of Troy's government. Sincerely, Rory Jennings. The next email is from Victoria Carezzi in the Hillside neighborhood. Thank you for the opportunity to quote unquote speak. I am writing to ask Mayor Madden and City Council members, why are you silent? Your silence speaks volumes, and we all have theories on why you are so quiet. So why not clear the rumors and please tell us what happened with Edson's murder and what motivates your silence and inaction to make real structural changes in Troy, New York's police force? I am a white woman with white children living in Troy's diverse hillside neighborhood. I live my life simply and teach my children to be compassionate, kind, and honest. My 8-year-old understands that the color of her skin provides her safety that Black and brown people just do not have here in their hometown of Troy. If you take the time to listen to Edson's son talk about his intensified fear after his father was murdered by a police officer, it is heart-wrenching. To me, it is simple. Please lead the city in the ways I strive to raise my children. Edson no longer has the opportunity to raise his son in these ways. Retrain your police, create a real police review board, restructure your system to include community-led strategies, and tell us the truth about the cover-up. Lead with love so we can all be free, including you. Thank you for your time, Victoria. The next letter is from Abby Kinchy on Sauce Avenue. Dear Troy City Council members, my name is Abby Kinchy, and I live on Sauce Avenue in Troy, District 3. I am writing to provide a short statement for this evening's City Council meeting. I have lived in Troy since 2007, and it saddens me that this is not the first time that I have found it necessary to speak to the City Council about problems with the Troy Police Department. Unfortunately, the TPD has repeatedly brought shame upon our city by committing acts of violence against Black people. We now have a chance to change the reputation of our city from a place where the police are brutal, racist, and out of control to a place where all residents are treated with dignity. A month ago, I marched with thousands of other Trojans to call for a fundamental transformation in the role of police in society. Across the country, there have been thousands of demonstrations, millions of marchers making the same demands. It fills me with hope to see cities like Minneapolis taking on the challenge to build meaningful alternatives to the police force. Can a small city like Troy also reimagine how we ensure safety and security? We owe it to every Black person in Troy to try. I support the demands that have been made by our local organizations, Justice for Demeke and Troy for Black Lives. They enumerate concrete actions that this City Council should take. A crucial starting point is to form a civilian review board that fully represents the communities that are most impacted by police violence. Black people and other people of color, particularly those who are young, disabled, LGBT, or formerly incarcerated. This civilian review board must have subpoena power and true authority to oversee the Troy Police Department. I am well aware that the TPD and the police union will fight this idea, and you, along with the mayor, will feel pressured to keep the police happy by maintaining the status quo. I implore you to do what is right, even if it is uncomfortable. You cannot keep looking the other way when the police do harm to the people of the city you represent. Thank you for your time, Abby Kinchy. The next letter is from Kimberly Brown on South Lake Avenue. Dear City Council members, I am a resident of Troy near the intersection of South Lake Avenue and Hoosick Street. My husband and I moved to Troy 4 years ago, and we intend on staying here. While we love where we live and we love our neighborhood, we have been very concerned about policing in Troy generally and the police presence in our area and other areas that are primarily communities of color. We are particularly concerned about the well-being and safety of our Black neighbors. We ourselves are white. We care deeply about their lives and feel they deserve the same respect and benefit of the doubt that white people do. Unfortunately, we have been aware for some time that this is usually not the case for many Black people, including those in the Troy community. For this reason, I am writing to encourage you to immediately freeze additional funding for the Troy Police Department. I request that $10 million from the TPD budget be reallocated to community services and projects led by and centering on the Black communities most impacted by violent policing. The excessive TPD budget should be redistributed to investing in trauma-informed social workers who have knowledge of cultural competency, domestic violence, LGBTQ+ issues, and mental health concerns. This is important because we will personally never call the police for any issues in our community because we absolutely do not trust TPD to handle or de-escalate situations appropriately and with another person's basic humanity in mind. We need other options. Further, I am writing in solidarity and support with the demands of Troy for Black Lives. The City Council has done nothing to address these demands, nor the historic rally last month of 11,000 people. The City Council continues to be complicit in the murder and harm of Black people in Troy. We remember the lynching of Edson Thevenin and the attempted murder of Demeke McDonald by Troy police, as well as the subsequent cover-ups by Mayor Madden, district attorneys, and other Troy officials. Additionally, I would like to know how Mayor Madden intends to be accountable for his recent letter where he states, quote, "Troy should be proud to add its voice to the outcry that Black lives do matter," end quote. What is the city actually doing to demonstrate this? I have seen nothing substantial. Defund Troy Police now, invest in Black communities. They have been ignored for far too long, and we will not stand for it. Sincerely, Kimberly Brown, South Lake Avenue. The next letter is from Mickey Dobbin or Dobin on 2nd Street. Dear City Council members, I am a resident of Troy on 2nd Street. As a neighbor, a resident and member of the community, and a union member, I am writing to encourage you to immediately freeze additional funding for the Troy Police Department and reallocate $10 million from the TPD budget to community services and projects led by and centering on Black communities most impacted by violent policing. The excessive TPD budget should and can be redistributed to any number of programs and services that does public good, like housing and education, not harm, like policing. This is important because I live every day as someone whose privileges makes me under-policed for my benefit. For me and my life, the police might as well be completely defunded, as they do not prey on me like they do to my neighbors. I am writing in solidarity and support with the demands of Troy for Black Lives. The City Council has done nothing to address these demands, nor the historic rally last month of 11,000 people. The City Council continues to be complicit in the murder and harm of Black people in Troy. We remember the murder of Edson Thevenin and the attempted murder of Demeke McDonald by Troy Police. We need to defund the Troy PD, end any cooperation with ICE, support our immigrant communities, make Troy a sanctuary city, have a civilian review board with real power, including subpoena power, and investigate the murder and cover up of Edson Thevenin. Defund Troy Police now, invest in Black communities. Sincerely, Mickey Dobin. The next letter is from Olivia Hoover Mahoney on Glen Avenue. Hello, my name is Olivia Hoover Mahoney, and I am a resident of the city of Troy on Glen Avenue. I live there with my husband, Ian. We have been residents of Troy for about 2 years and are homeowners. I am writing in hopes of drawing the City Council's attention to the extremely distressing issues regarding the Troy Police Department. The budget for this department, last I checked, is $20 million, and the department itself is highly militarized. This kind of out-of-control spending on police in Troy harms our city. These funds could be and should be spent on vulnerable communities, not on policing. We are a city that has serious problems with drug use and poverty, and all of this stems from lack of resources for the actual residents of the city. The root causes of this pain and suffering can be addressed by diverting the absurdly high budget of the police department to the actual communities they are supposed to be serving. Our schools, our community gardens, our roads, drug treatment and recovery centers, and social services all would benefit from the funds currently used by Troy PD. A reallocation of $10 million from the Troy Police Department would be an untold blessing to the people of Troy. As a proud resident of this city, I ask that you consider this. Thank you very much for your time. Sincerely, Olivia Hoover Mahoney. And the last letter that I'm going to be reading is from Christian Grigoraskos on 2nd Avenue. Actually, this was addressed directly to Mara and to Jim Gully, so it actually starts, hello, Jim. So this is directed to you, Jim. I have been a proud Trojan for the last 7 years and reside on 2nd Avenue in the heart of historic Lansingburg. Recent national events surrounding police brutality against people of color have raised the volume on a centuries-old conversation, and I feel that now is a moment of reckoning where justice for all must prevail and real work must be done to put an end to systemic racism in our city and society. I urge you and your fellow council members to hear the demands of Troy for Black Lives, formerly Justice for Demeke, and take bold action to start the process of repairing a broken and biased system. All of their demands are important, but I especially would like to see a civilian review board of police actions with subpoena power and representation of at least 60% of people most affected by police violence in our community. I have heard many times in Lansingburg and other parts of Troy that people believe the answer to safer communities is to simply have more police. That is a recipe for disaster. I encourage you to consider the diversity of community building strategies that will contribute to a brighter future for our city and put funding towards those and defund the police department. I await council discussions regarding Governor Cuomo's Order Number 203 on police reform and reinvention. Parentheses, I would suggest less firearm training and more mediation, flotation therapy, yoga, and associated healing arts that have proven beneficial for stressful work environments, parentheses. And Mayor Madden's timeline regarding this order. I'm sure that the Troy Police Department is part of a fraternal brotherhood with deep ties to regional government, and that probably makes anyone in government afraid to speak out against police, corruption, and misbehavior. If TPD plays by the rules, then they will have nothing to hide, and the Civilian Review Board will have an easy job. Don't be afraid, the people are behind you. We want a better future for people of all races, colors, and creeds, just like the 14th Amendment prescribes. I hope you will do the right thing. I will continue to work in my neighborhood for justice and equality to share this burden we all carry in being members of a unified community. Thank you, Christian. And that's Christian Grigoroskos, Second Ave. That finishes the 15 letters that I had to read, and I'm going to hand this off to Councilperson Steele now.
Thank you. The next email says, Dear City Council members, county legislators, I am a resident of Troy living in the News on Broadway. I am a recent graduate of RPI, and I love this city so much that I decided to stay here after graduation. I am currently working at Little Peck's on Broadway, and I love our community. To me, it is home. I am writing to encourage you to immediately freeze additional funding for the Troy Police Department and reallocate $10 million from Troy PD budget to community services and projects led by and centering Black communities most impacted by violent policing. The excessive TPD budget should be redistributed to the centers in our community doing the hard work of educating and supporting children and adults to become the best that they can be. Joseph's House, Capitol Roots, Unity House, Boys and Girls Club, to name a few, are working to empower those who have been dealt a rougher hand in life, to help them achieve all that they can. A community is only as strong as it treats those in need. We need to recognize that police presence leads to violence and crime, while community initiatives lead to stronger and better communities. I'm writing in solidarity and support with the demands of Troy for Black Lives. The City Council has done nothing to address these demands, nor the historic rally last month of 11,000 people. I went to that rally, and the love could be felt all around you. The Black community in Troy needs their voices to be heard. A divestment from police is only the beginning of reparations that they deserve to rebuild their fair share of this community. The City Council continues to be complicit in the murder and harm of Black people in Troy. We remember the lynching of Edson Thevenin and the attempted murder of Demick McDonald by Troy police, as well as the subsequent cover-ups by Mayor Madden, district attorneys, and other Troy officials. Defund Troy Police now, invest in Black communities. Sincerely, Nancy Bush. Moving on. Hi, Ms. Steele. I'm one of your constituents. I live on 15th Street. I'm writing on behalf of my partner and I as voters and as parents of an almost one-year-old. Ms. Steele, I can't imagine living my life without my daughter. I also can't imagine what it would be like for her to live her life without one of her parents. And yet so many folks of color live with the fear of losing their children, parents, siblings, and friends to police violence. Police violence must stop. I'm writing to ask that you support police accountability. Support the group Troy for Black Lives in their call for a civilian review board with subpoena power and representation of no less than 60% of people most impacted by police violence, folks of color. Support their demands that Troy create programs that divert folks at risk of entering the criminal justice system towards community-based treatment alternatives. My wife, my community, and I are all counting on you to show your support for Black lives. Thank you for your time. Scott Staffage. Good evening. My name is Lyndon Horvath, and I live on 2nd Street in Troy. I am writing to express my extreme discontent with the lack of accountability from Troy's City Council, Mayor, and Police Department in regards to addressing the consistent, at times deadly, and well-documented history of the Troy PD's use of excessive force with our neighbors. Recently, the mayor's office made a statement in regards to Black Lives Matter. While a statement can be lovely, without action behind it to ensure that Black lives in our community are valued and ensured safety, these words are hollow. In specifics, some of what I would like to see our council and mayor address are the following. Issue a timeline to address Executive Order 203 regarding police reform and state funding. Create a truly powerful and representative of impacted communities police objective review board. Ensure the board has autonomy and subpoena power. Release all information regarding the cover-up of Edson Thevenant's murder by the Troy PD. Hold those involved in covering up this information that the community has every right to accountable. Hold a public safety meeting to address police violence in Troy and police reform. Address the outsized Troy Police Department budget. It is incredibly disappointing to see our schools and public infrastructure consistently defunded while our police continue to have a greater share of the city's budget. Adopt a resolution to turn Troy into a sanctuary city. Respectfully, history will judge what we do in a moment where our city saw 11,000 people march to assert that Black lives matter. I strongly urge the administration and council to develop accountable and concrete measures to address the harm done to multiple lives, families, and communities in Troy. We are watching. Sincerely, Lyndon Horvath. Dear City Council members, Troy County legislators, I am a resident of Troy and current student at RPI. I am writing to encourage you to immediately freeze additional funding for the Troy Police Department and reallocate $10 million from Troy PD budget to community services and to projects led by and centering Black communities most impacted by violent policing. The excessive TPD budget should be redistributed to supporting the proactive growth of our community as opposed to reacting to a system that fails us BIPOC from the start. I'm only a student where I am today because of special programming held and funded by the city where I grew up. My little faith in the justice system through an undocumented family and experience of racial profiling led me down a path opposite to the one I have now. I can only fathom what it is our Black community goes through every day and the justice system that is of a disservice to them, preventing the growth of their community. I am writing in solidarity and support with the demands of Troy for Black lives. The City Council has done nothing to address these demands, nor the historic rally last month of 11,000 people. The City Council continues to be complicit in the murder and harm of Black people in Troy. We remember the lynching of Edson Thevenant and the attempted murder of Dominique McDonald by Troy police, as well as the subsequent cover-ups by Mayor Madden, district attorneys, and other Troy officials. Defund Troy Police now, invest in Black communities. Sincerely, Marvin Rios. Dear City Council members and county legislators, I am a resident of Troy on 4th Street in Little Italy. I've been a resident for over 3 years, and I am writing because from my time in the city, it has become painfully obvious that the Troy Police Department has too much power that they choose to wield irresponsibly and dangerously. I strongly encourage you to immediately freeze additional funding for the Troy Police Department. In addition, I implore you to reallocate $10 million from the Troy PD budget to community services and projects led by and centering Black communities most impacted by violent policing. The excessive TPD budget should be redistributed first and foremost to education, which is always where the majority of the budget should go. But now more so than ever, considering learning remotely should be accessible, while the novel coronavirus makes it dangerous for students to physically attend school. Reallocated funds from the TPD should also be distributed amongst public housing projects, addiction counseling, and health services. Our community would be hugely impacted for the better if these areas received additional funding. Think of all the people who would be benefited from services such as these that they've been requesting forever, but only have ever received additional police, but have only received additional policing. We must all pledge to invest in people's futures as opposed to increasing policing budgets, which disproportionately impact the Black community. I'm writing in solidarity and support with the demands of Black for Troy, for Black Lives. The City Council has done nothing to address these reasonable demands, nor the historic rally last month of 11,000 people. The City Council continues to be complicit in the murder and harm of Black people in Troy. We remember the lynchings of Ed Thevenin and the attempted murder of Demeke McDonald by police, as well as the subsequent cover-ups by Mayor Madden, district attorneys, and other Troy officials. Defund Troy Police now, invest in Black communities. Sincerely, Alicia Burnson. My name is Chris Bassett. I live on 4th Street in South Troy and have lived, gone to school, and worked in Troy for the entire 40 years of my life. I'm urging you to immediately freeze additional funding for the Troy Police Department and reallocate at least $10 million from the obscenely bloated TPD budget to community services and projects led by and centering Black communities most impacted by violent policing. Additionally, the City Council and Mayor Madden have done nothing to address the demands of Troy for Black Lives, nor the historic rally last month of 11,000 people. The City Council continues to be complicit in the murder and harm of Black people in Troy, including, but certainly not limited to, the killing of Ed Thevenin and subsequent cover-up. Black Lives Matter is not just a catchy slogan. You have to actually mean it and commit to acting on it. I see you're in action. We see you're in action. Fix it. Defund Troy Police now. Invest in Black communities. Thank you. I missed this. Oh no, that's something else. Dear Mayor Madden and City Council members, I'd like to express my support of Troy for Black Lives, who so skillfully and safely organized the June 7th rally for Black Lives in Troy, attended by over 11,000 people. This was truly a great and historic day for Troy. I am so grateful to the organizers whose brilliant focus made the event a success, and grateful to the residents who worked in safety teams and as medics to keep the peaceful protesters safe and well. I'd like to thank the community leaders and youth who in the week prior to the rally painted beautiful murals and affirmations of life on the plywood nailed up over much of downtown. Downtown businesses had, to my understanding, been encouraged by city officials to board up storefronts out of the officials' distrust of community protest. While speaking of the stellar and meaningful achievements of the Troy community around the June 7 rally, I'd also like to uphold the words and demands issued by Troy for Black Lives that will help move our city into a more just future. Troy for Black Lives is calling for a measurable commitment to police accountability and justice that protects the citizens, visitors, and neighbors of Troy. The demands are as follows. We demand that cops stop killing us and our children. We demand a newly formed civilian review board with subpoena power and representation of no less than 60% of people most impacted by violence and police violence. This includes Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQIA people, young people, people with disabilities, and formerly incarcerated people. We demand the exploration and creation of diversion programs away from criminal justice involvement to community-based treatment alternatives, especially for youth and the mentally ill. We demand the end of unnecessary incarceration for matters of substance use or sex work, which disproportionately affect exploited and impoverished communities. We demand the disentanglement of county government with ICE. We demand that Troy be designated as a sanctuary city. Finally, I'd like to join many in Troy and across the state to ask for an investigation by City Council and a civilian review board into the facts of the fatal police shooting of Edson Thevenin. Troy is a thriving community with brilliant community leaders, and I ask that you support us and our demands as we continue working toward a more just city. Thank you, Kevin Lovelady, 2nd Street. Dear City Council members, county legislators, I'm a resident of Troy near the intersection of South Lake and Hoosick Street. Ken, did you read one from Ross Coons?
I think I did, Mara.
No, I
Yeah,
did not,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe I did.
This is from a different person.
Oh, okay.
All right. Sorry about that. Dear City Council members, county legislators, I'm a resident of Troy near the intersection of South Lake Avenue and Hoosick Street. My wife and I moved to Troy 4 years ago. While we love where we live and we love our neighborhood, we have been very concerned about policing in Troy. We are particularly concerned about the safety of our Black neighbors. We ourselves are white. We care about their well-being and feel they deserve the same respect and benefit of the doubt that white people do. Unfortunately, we have been aware of for some time that this is unusual. This is usually not the case for many Black people, including those in Troy. For this reason, I'm writing to encourage you to immediately freeze additional funding for the Troy Police Department. I request that $10 million from the TPD budget be reallocated to community services and projects led by and centering the Black communities most impacted by violent policing. The excessive TPD budget should be redistributed to serving Black communities and youth in the ways Black community members see fit. This is important because their needs and voices have gone unheard for far too long. We've seen the impact of racism in predominantly Black areas, poor infrastructure and upkeep, excessive force and carelessness towards the community. Further, I'm writing in solidarity and support with the demands of Troy for Black lives. The City Council has done nothing to address these demands, nor the historic rally last month of 11,000 people. The City Council continues to be complicit in the murder and harm of Black people in Troy. We remember the lynching of Edson Thevenin and the attempted murder of Demi McDonald by Troy police, as well as the subsequent cover-ups by Mayor Madden, district attorneys, and other Troy officials. Additionally, I would like to know how Mayor Madden intends to be accountable for his recent letter where he states Troy should be proud to add its voice to the outcry that Black lives do matter. What is the city actually doing to demonstrate this? We have seen nothing substantial. Defund Troy Police now, invest in Black communities. Sincerely, Ross Coons, South Lake Avenue. Dear esteemed members of the Troy City Council, my name is Ian Mahoney Hoover. I reside on Glen Avenue in Troy. I own a home in the city and I'm a registered voter in Rensselaer County. I'm writing to you today to comment on a critical issue that we face in our fair city, the issue of police accountability. Well, I would like to applaud Mayor Madden for his written statement on June 4th in support of Black Lives Matter protests across the country. I'm curious as to whether city leadership is working to answer the demands for justice and accountability that were made by 11,000 people in Troy last month. Solidarity is important, but is toothless without serious movement for change. I encourage you to reallocate money from the Troy Police budget towards programs and services that would benefit the communities in our city impacted by violent policing. The communities of North Central and Lansingburg particularly come to mind, where roads and public spaces are poorly maintained and there is a near complete lack of public resources available to lower income communities, yet police presence is extremely heavy. A world without police violence is possible if local communities have the resources to manage poverty, mental illness, and addiction. I call for full transparency by Mayor Madden and city officials regarding the death of Edson Thevenin and the shooting of Dominique McDonald, and for officials who committed acts of transgression in these cases to be held accountable to the fullest extent. I would like to see Troy's plan to adhere to New York Executive Order 203 regarding police reform, a civilian board with subpoena power, for instance, with representation from communities impacted by police violence would be an ideal first step ensuring police accountability. Our city is an old, proud, and venerable city. It is crucial that city leadership elected by popular vote truly represents city residents and create strong, positive communities. It is one thing to say Black Lives Matter. It is another to examine and reform in ways that put weight behind those words. Sincerely, Ian Mahoney Hoover. Dear City Council and Mayor, my name is Dr. Eric Guy Schaefer, and I live on 2nd Street in Troy. I have lived in Troy off and on for 9 years, and I intend to continue to call Troy home for a long time. I love the city, and I think it is truly special. I was deeply moved by the June 7 March for Black Lives, a beautiful demonstration of the widespread condemnation of racism in the criminal justice system. I believe in my heart that it was the start of a new chapter of Troy's history, one in which the city of Troy makes amends for its history of racial injustice and out of control policing. Let me tell you about some of what I hope for. I imagine Troy investing its police objective review board with real power to hold TPD accountable when they use excessive force. The board would be able to subpoena officers and others who are involved in wrongdoing. Our police department could be meaningfully accountable to the people who are most impacted by police violence and the criminal justice system. I imagine Troy investing in programs that favor community-based care over incarceration. Troy could respond to residents in need not by punishing them further, but by helping them to find the support they need. Troy could respond to drug use and sex work without the threat of violence and imprisonment. We could live in a city that helps its residents find ways to control them. I imagine Troy disentangling itself from immigration and customs enforcement. Troy could be a place where all residents, regardless of immigration status, have a right to live safely in community. We could be a sanctuary city and stand up to efforts on the part of county and national governments to terrorize members of our community. I imagine Troy investigating our long history of police violence and delivering justice for everyone who has been killed or injured by the police. I imagine a process that treats the victims of police violence fairly, that does not try to blame police violence on its victims and holds police fully responsible for their actions. The process of justice would, of course, also need to address the cover-up of wrongdoing around the murder of Edson Thevenin, holding accountable everyone involved in hiding evidence. I imagine the positive piece of justice, as Dr. King puts it, for every victim of police violence in Troy. I imagine Troy spending more on education, public health, youth development, and other beneficial programs than it does on policing. The money that is currently being spent on the police department could instead be invested in Black communities in ways that are determined by the communities. The punitive parity of safety created by policing could be replaced with the positive safety created by community-led programs that meet the real needs of residents. I imagine Troy responding to protests with open arms and open hearts rather than boarded up windows, concrete barricades, and military gear. I imagine a Troy where police do not kill or injure anyone, where the police are meaningfully beholden to residents, where the city invests in communities, and where Black life is valued. I hope that you will do whatever is in your power to work toward these goals Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Dr. Guy Schaefer. My name is Molly Dreyer. I am currently residing on 3rd Street in Troy. I have witnessed the city take many steps towards growth in the 11 years living here. I have noticed that the growth of Troy seems to be centralized in business districts, whereas the neighborhoods that are more racially diverse could use the same enthusiasm from the city as the city's center. I think the city of Troy could use a different type of growth, one which elevates the youth, provides more housing opportunities, creates harm reductive drug programs, and provides mental health assistance to communities which need these programs the most. The revenue to fund these community-based organizations should come from the police department, which receives an exorbitant amount of funding. The city should not generate revenue by siphoning it directly from communities who may be struggling financially and on the cusp of extreme poverty through petty fines and traffic tickets. Cuomo issued an executive order for local governments to re-examine police department budgets. Aside from defunding the Troy Police Department, the city should reallocate these funds towards communities which would benefit directly. If the city makes these budget changes, I believe the city will see even more growth to one which supports the people who make Troy. And I believe this is the last one that I have. No, may have.
You have two more. One from Amanda Wild. She doesn't have her address here, but I do know that she's a resident of Troy.
Right, she's actually one of my constituents in District 3. Dear City Council persons, I'm writing to implore you to do everything you can to stop another civilian being shot by or killed by the Troy Police. Please be proactive in protecting Black lives, especially. Please seek and demand justice for Edson Amanda Wild. And then, dear City Council members, my name is Adam Retzlaff. I am a longtime resident of Troy on Broadway. It is with anger and disappointment in our city's leadership or lack thereof that I am writing to you today. While both the nation and our city are wrestling with systemic racism, there has been absolutely no attempt from Troy officials to meet the moment despite a well-organized and thoughtful list of demands you have received from Troy for Black Lives, formerly Justice for Demick. I'm writing to encourage you to immediately freeze additional funding for the Troy Police Department and reallocate $10 million from the TBD budget to community services and projects led by and centering Black communities most impacted by violent policing. The excessive Troy budget should be redistributed to address the social causes of crime rather than actively criminalizing your own constituents. Drug use and homelessness are two problems that Troy, like much of America, addresses through the police rather than addressing the needs of the people that have left them homeless or addicted in the first place. These are two areas where I would like to see this money reinvested. Further, I support all the demands made by Troy for Black Lives. Stop killing us and our children. Form a civilian review board with subpoena power and represented by at least 60% of those most affected by police violence. Fully and impartially investigate every instance of use of deadly force by a police officer. Cut all ties in cooperation with ICE and invest in community-based alternatives to policing. Lastly, all information pertaining to the murder of Edson Thevenin and the attempted murder of Demick McDonald must be made public, regardless of which members of the current Troy government are implicated in the cover-up. In solidarity, Adam Retzlaff. I think that's it, Mara, correct?
That's it. I misspoke earlier. I said there were 60, but there were actually 58. So that's the last I have.
Oh, so Sue, we have to take up two more to make it even. Okay. Thank you to all the folks who have written in to the City Council. I will now If it's all okay, take a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion, Councilmember McPherson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Zaluski, and discussion, just in closing, once again, I think all of us certainly listened this evening, and we'll be moving forward together with the mayor, the community, and our Troy Police Force and our neighborhoods. So saying that, we have a motion, we have a second to
Well, can we
adjourn.
continue discussion?
Oh, absolutely.
So real quick, first of all, there was that, the other letter from Allison King from Waterford. We did not read that. I assume we'll just put that in, we'll add it to the record.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Zaluski, we can add that to the record. Thank you.
Okay, but not read it.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it's fine.
Okay, so then I just wanted to say to, my colleagues, and to, everyone that's watching, and especially to the people that took time to write into us regarding these, serious issues. We, I know we're getting accused of not doing anything, and I just want to let people know that we are taking action as a city council. I've been in multiple conversations with my colleagues, with the mayor, with the administration. We're talking about how to proceed with the implementation of Governor Cuomo's Executive Order 203. We have, and thanks to Councilperson Steele, we have a resolution in support of Troy for Black Lives, and that also creates a working group. Sue, what's the name of the working group? The Community Service.
Reimagine Troy Community Justice Services Work Group.
Yes, Community Justice Services Work Group is what we're tentatively calling it. We were going to try and have that resolution ready for tonight, but we don't want to rush it. We don't want to rush it and push it out there. We are going to have a finance meeting next week. Correct, Council President Mantello?
Yeah, I do plan to call finance next week in a special meeting to consider waiving the pool fees for 2020. I had heard earlier that the mayor is also in support of that. And we have to amend the code in order to do that. So I will be calling the finance. I just want to remind Councilmember Steele and all council members when drafting legislation to please follow the rules and copy the council president. And
Absolutely.
Clearly, the pro tem was copied on this, but the whole purpose is to ensure that the appropriate colleagues are, being informed. And what I'll do is when I receive that legislation, I'll refer it to the appropriate committee. And since we're having a finance, I would be fine referring that to the finance committee as a whole.
Yeah.
Council President, it was our complete intention to tomorrow, we'll be sending it to the Corporation Council and all
Yes.
those by the rules. That's absolutely our full intent.
Thank you.
So we'll have a lot of time for everyone to look it over. I think I might have been trying to jump the gun a little bit because, we feel compelled to do something. When you receive all these, we get a lot of letters saying that we're not taking action and we're spending so much time behind the scenes. I don't know why I've gone blurry now, but
I saw that. I thought it was my glasses.
I think we're shedding tears.
Yeah.
Ken, you're moving us.
So we've spent a lot of time, discussing this and talking about how we can play our part in this movement. And, we see other cities doing things. And I know some of my constituents have sent me links to articles. So, we know that folks are taking action, other municipalities. We are going to join with our fellow municipalities, but we want to do things the right way the first time. We want to make sure that we consult with all of our stakeholders, especially community leaders. So we think that our part in this as a city council, and we'll discuss this because we haven't, of course, talked to everyone on the council yet, but our feeling is that the city council, as representatives of the residents of Troy, that we can insert our piece into the executive order by convening a work group of citizens that care deeply about the issues that are being presented to us, and let the citizens come back to us to give us, what they're looking for, what we want to see in, reimagining community justice services. So stay tuned, because we have, we're going to get this resolution out there, and then the next step will be assembling a work group and receiving applications from interested residents. And I hope there's a lot of interest. Certainly, based on what we saw tonight, there should be a tremendous amount of interest in participation, and it's going to take time. People have to understand that people are going to have to dedicate their time to come together and build consensus in how to move forward. And we understand, of course, we've seen the demands from the Troy for Black Lives group. We also want to include Troy NAACP and our faith leaders. We want to have a diverse representation of our city as we move forward with this. But yes, we are going to take action. There's no question about it.
And to follow up with that, I haven't seen the resolution yet. A couple things, obviously, I can't see the mayor, but I know the mayor is still on with us. And, I want to see how this working group is going to coincide with the umbrella working group, which is going to be should be comprised of, obviously, the community, many of the stakeholders that you just mentioned, and in the executive order, the police department, the mayor, and others. So you and I had kind of talked about this a little while ago, Ken. I haven't seen the legislation, and I am curious how that is going to coincide with the, umbrella working group, and which may have the same people. So I look forward to receiving the legislation. Obviously, I sent the day after the governor sent the executive order, I immediately contacted the mayor to request the working group be comprised with a timeline in terms of setting out from whenever March, because it has to be passed by April 1. So I'm thinking March, coming back in terms of the timeline, March, stepping back, so we could obviously be a part of that. So certainly, I'd love to hear from the mayor on this. Like I said, I can't see him. I'm hoping he's there. Are you still there, Mayor?
Well, until he gets on, I can say that, the intention of the legislation is to provide a community resource to inform us as the policymaking branch of government as we move forward in reimagining criminal justice services in Troy. It's not intended to circumvent the efforts of the mayor in any way, but I see him now, so he can speak for
Council President, real quick, Council President.
Sure, Council Member Ash McPherson.
I don't know, I'm assuming you're all aware that the mayor, the deputy mayor, the police chief, the assistant chief, there was like 15 of us, Eileen, we all got together and we were having, and Carmel, you were there, and we are in discussions. We know we have issues and we are out there working together. Just everything isn't always announced, but we are out there, we are doing things, and we are working for the betterment of all our communities.
Thank you, Council Member. And, Mayor, maybe I just want to make sure, and like I say, I haven't seen the legislation. So, I get it, Council Member Steele. I know we want to do something. I just want to make sure that obviously it coincides with the plan, the actual plan that's going to be worked on. Mayor. And I don't want to piecemeal, like you said, Ken, Councilmember Zaluski. I don't want, like, Utica and Rochester, they are announcing different things, other communities. I want to see a full-fledged plan, not kind of piecemeal it, like you said. Sorry, Mayor.
Well, I said that we want to play our part, to provide
Right.
our piece to the entire puzzle, because the administration actually will be presenting the final plan. But as council members and as representatives of the people, we want to make sure that that plan includes significant input from the public.
Right, but that's what the EO, the executive order, I mean, it mandates it. I'm not against anything. I haven't seen anything. I don't know, what is happening in terms of the timeline for the overall plan. So Mayor, maybe you could help us. Thank you. Sorry.
Sure. Well, I wish I could help you. This is a very organic process. The executive order is not well defined. It does refer to guidance that's to come yet from DOB and DCJS. I have some indication that they'll have something to say on that next week. I know everybody is eager to move this forward, as are we, and we're spending a lot of time trying to think through a process that includes input from communities that don't show up at council meetings or tend not to show up at neighborhood meetings, but have feelings, and try to create an environment where they feel not just welcome, but they feel safe to participate. So there's a lot of nuance to work out in this. I know the council is eager to move forward, and at this point, I'm trusting that we'll figure out a way to work through this together. I'm not concerned about the legislation. I support the legislation, and we're just going to have to be nimble as we move forward. We're trying to respond to a mandate that is not as specific, I think, as we would like to see it. Some specificity may come out in the guidance next week. Hopefully it will. But nonetheless, we're going to work our way through this together. And I trust that whatever the council does, the administration and the police department can work hand in hand with the council on this.
Great. So we'll get a copy, hopefully tomorrow, the resolution, and we'll take it from there. I have no problem referring it to finance with the pool reso. And Mayor, I'm not sure if also you want to send us the agreement with the Troy Boys and Girls Club, the proposed, just with dates and dollars. I think that's all maybe that has to be amended from last year's agreement, but I'm not sure.
I'll check with the deputy in the morning. She was handling that process.
Okay. And okay, any further discussion? Okay, I can't wait till we can actually socially distance, have a meeting. And thank you all, and we'll be talking very soon. We have a motion, we have a second. I want to make sure, does anyone else have anything else? Okay, thank you. Good night. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you. Thanks. Talk to you tomorrow.
Okay.
Yep.
Good night.
Good night.
Good morning, everybody.
Stay well.